Okay, this is episode 18 of Counterpoints. The show is now legal to get fucked in America. I mean, that should probably be the maybe I should start okay, maybe here's what we're going to do. On Summoning Insight, it took us like 70 odd episodes, but me and Monty as a joke decided that from now on every single one should have sort of like a subtitle, you know. So the first one to have this, for example, was called Many Roads to Sodomy or something. Even though
how the fuck did you come up with that one?
Oh no, that's exactly, that's what I mean. It's because the whole thing is that was a line in the show, but it was obviously like in a super digression that we went down some mad path. Obviously the show had nothing to do with that, but the genius of it was it meant that we got a thread really high on League of Legends Reddit without getting removed. That just called Many Roads to Sodomy. So in the same sense, in the same sense, I feel like this episode we should just call it episode 18, Old Enough to Get Fucked. Like, I think that's just a sick title, right? It draws people in.
Yeah, that's an awesome byline. I like it.
Yeah. So, okay. Last episode is the Vendetta one, which, as I seem to remember, was just after DreamHack Bucharest. And unfortunately, just because of the timing of like when Moses has to do Pro League and I had to travel, etc., we didn't get to do one before ESL New York, which is a little bit unfortunate, but whatever. We can't get every event. We've got them now. So there's a lot of stuff happened between then and now. And unlike other shows, I'm a bit more organized now. I've actually got most of it laid out. So the key thing is, I still want it to be like quite free in terms of like how we discuss things. Like, you don't have to wait specifically for something to happen if it ties into some other news, you know. But let's just run through a few things and see in general like roughly what we think of them, because some of them are fairly small pieces of news, but that have like a context outside of that. So for example, I'll start right now. So we'll get, by the way, the ESL One New York stuff will be towards the end. We're going to start with some news actually, which is that last month it was announced that Flipside was trialing that Russian player called Electronic instead of Shara, and it put that Shara was inactive. Now, obviously, Flipside is a team that has a top 2 seed at the next major because they made it to the round of 8 there. They obviously beat NIP and lost to SK, and they were a team where they're actually quite famous for being one of those teams where, for me, they were like stuck in hell, where they're like one of the best tier 2 teams, but realistically, they're never going to be like a proper tier 1 team because, like, for me, they never really had quite enough firepower, and I have to say, I do have to put some of that blame at Shara's feet, because he's a player where statistically he's terrible, but it's not as though he's terrible, but he's like in-game leader, or he had some sort of really crazy level of team play, or, you know, does his job. Like, I'll give you an example, okay, if Maikelele ever does badly, I actually oftentimes still feel like it's alright, because I remember Hiko and some other players telling me that in CSGO, since he doesn't have the star player style of play, that the thing he's really good at now, for example, is like he tries to stay alive for as long as possible, and his job is to anchor a bomb site. Like, these are all things that will never show up on the stats page, but can actually win you games and make you useful even if you can't kill people. As far as I know, Shara never did any of that. So Electronic is a guy where, from what I remember from online matches, there was one where famously he got like 50 kills or something. He had like some really crazy stats in one match. And so I know people were always wondering, like, I think his team went to one of like the CIS minors or something. So I know his name was out there and it was someone that people were considering. I can't myself obviously know how good he is as a player. What do you think in general of Flipside removing Shara and at least trying someone new? What do you think of this?
I like it. I mean, if you're going to remove someone, Shara's the one, right? And Electronic, he's shown some good things. He was the one. Was that for? I think it was for Cologne at the CIS minor where they did like that crazy like 8 overtime game or something, and he had like 73 kills on one map in those overtimes. If I recall that correctly. Well, I mean, I know he had 73 kills, but that was some like 8 overtimes. So, I mean, he showed some good things. It's just, you know, he's never been on a team where it can become like consistent, where he can actually play against the best teams. He can be in some kind of a system. From what I've seen, just looking at his match history, it's just, I mean, he was in what, Fluffy Gangsters or Empire, like teams that just don't have a chance of competing. So, I mean, coming on to Flipside, the good thing is he's going to be under Blade, who is like sneakily one of the better in-game leaders. Like the fact that he's been able to bring his team into the top 8 at majors, bring him 2 majors and then top 8 at the last one. That's actually incredible with the talent they've had. So the good thing is there's this talent that we have yet to see reach its potential, and now it has that kind of leadership to guide it and direct it, and see where it goes from there. And if you could start bringing some of this this hidden talent from the CIS region into Flipside, that team could be pretty good coming up at some point, maybe next year.
Yeah, because at the moment I feel like the interesting thing about the CIS scene is, for right now at least, Na'Vi has become what like Astralis was in 2015 for me. Like, it was obvious to me that as long as Astralis, when they were TSM, was winning tournaments, it was basically like, okay, this is the 5 for Astralis. You're never going to change any of them. And I'm sorry, everyone in Dignitas and these other teams, like, you're going to have to go to a phase or something, you know, because no one's going to, you're not going to get into Astralis. Like, it feels like right now, if you look at the 5 Na'Vi has, that's kind of the scenario for at least the, like, let's say minimum 3 months, okay, if not like 6 months or more. Basically, the top end of the CIS scene, that's locked, that's Na'Vi. But you've got these two teams, Gambit and Flipside, that are like the same level as teams, have very different approaches, and at best, they're only going to swap players or try new players out. So it does feel like at the moment it's quite set, because it feels like the Gambit players, the old school players, they want to be in that team and play together, so they're not going to leave. And the Flipside players in general like Blade, so it feels like now the lineups are pretty set. So to me, this is an obvious person where it was an obvious upgrade you could do. And put it this way, let's say, you know what, you know the way I always break down those roster moves, Moses, where I do like, should you remove the player, then should you add this player, like it's all separate. Let's say we did stage 1, should you remove the player? I mean, that one's pretty unanimous. You probably should remove Shara. So even if this didn't turn out to be the right move, the idea that at least you can then replace this guy with another guy who's an up-and-comer is the obvious thing to me. So I actually do think Flipside's a team where I would love them to get more firepower, because then I feel like they can be like a Dignitas, you know, like tactical team, but with a bit of skill to be able to get the upsets, you know. At the moment, it feels like, as with the NIP result of the major, it's going to take like borderline miracles to get those wins. Like, you need everyone on your team going ham, like for example Waylander having like the series of his life, and you need the other team to underperform. So that's where you're asking a bit too much. You want it to be like every match they're in with a little bit of a shot, you know, they can take a map here and there.
Yeah, and even that series against NIP, like Markelov had one of his like rare like god tier performances with the op next to it. So I think the big issue with Flipside, I mean, while you mentioned someone like World Edit and Waylander, I mean, those two guys, remember, like same with Dignitas, remember with guys like Config and Magisboy, like it's obvious the skill is there, it's just you never ever fucking see it. Like it's just very rarely shows up in the matches. It was, you know, they'd have one good one and they'd have like 3 mediocre ones and a bad, like whatever it might be. Now that those guys have like Magisboy and Config have been playing well consistently, now you see what a danger Dignitas can be. So that's kind of like the same thing with Flipside here, is that if those guys start getting consistent and start being able to bring that level frequently, that team can get scary at any point. There's the talent on that roster, it just doesn't manifest itself often enough.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, actually, just to touch on that as like a general point about roster moves, the other key issue is, like, here's an interesting thing, okay? In the history of CS, I've noticed fans have a very linear way of thinking about teams. So the whole joke of, like, so-and-so is the problem, that's not a new thing. That's just become a meme now. Like, that is how fans used to think about every team. So if someone joins a team and they get worse, like, say Simple had joined Na'Vi and they'd kept losing, people would not have just said, oh, like, Na'Vi is a team's problem. They'd go, oh, Simple's obviously worse than Zeus. That's what people would in the past, at least, have come up with as the logic, right? And so that's never worked, because actually there's a very famous example in Counter-Strike history, right, of the Danish MTW lineup, which was the best in 2008, right? And what happened was, basically, in recruiting this player, who himself was once a star, Wimp, it's not that he was one of the best players against them. Like, he was just like an alright player at that point in time, and like pretty good skills, but like wasn't like some superstar. It's that actually, and this is the thing that the in-game leader Ave basically told me. He said what happened was, in recruiting him as a player, they then had to like stop and think, right, well, if he's going to play this position and this style, what's everyone else going to do? And what they did was, recruiting him had this weird knock-on effect where it changed something like two other players like styles. For example, it made one player, like I think it was MG, I think made him like the anchor on like the small sites, and then they changed over famously, they changed the player Sunder was actually a hybrid player, and they made him the main AWPer, and they used, and so all these, it was just the knock-on effect what actually made the team amazing. It wasn't that he was just carrying, you know. So likewise, in this scenario here, like the Dignitas example you give, okay, I still think Kirby is a better player than Magisboy. Like, I know in Astralis it isn't working, but from what I've seen of both of them in Dignitas, I would put my money on Kirby. But the difference is, I heard that when Kirby was in Dignitas, for whatever reason, with that lineup of players they had before they got Cajun, I heard that apparently Config sometimes had to play like roles and spots that he didn't necessarily want to play. So it can be a scenario that it's not that Kirby and Config have to be compared, but maybe having Magisboy and Cajun, in terms of what they want to do, opens up something for Config, you know, allows him then to play within his comfort zone. And so as a net whole, weirdly, it ends up being a better team, even if I think the individuals are worse. So that's just, I'm just making that point, because when fans are thinking about moves, you've got to think of that aspect as well, you know.
Yeah, and those are the hardest ones to really kind of predict or analyze, is how it's going to change all that stuff. Like look at Cloud9 even with their recent run of form when they bring Automatic in, which is like so lackluster of a pickup at the time, but he's not like he whatever he's brought to this team, like that consistent ability to just hold his spots and not try and be too much of a playmaker. Like Stewie feels more comfortable. You see Nothing playing much better because he's got a third player who can do his thing. He's not trying to be so mobile across the map. I mean, it's just weird how that interaction can happen at times. And that's the hardest part to predict about roster changes.
Yeah. So, okay, there was another CIS roster move, Moses, but here's the hilarious thing about it, okay? So what happened was Kucha was brought into Gambit instead of Spaze. Now, first of all, the funny thing about this, obviously, is that if you know anything about the history of HellRaisers, they've basically left HellRaisers and just remade HellRaisers, because obviously Kucha, Dosia and Adren played together a long time. They were actually in the old Virtus.Pro in the beginning of CSGO. And then obviously they made like Astana Dragons, which became HellRaisers. And gradually people left HellRaisers. And obviously Mo himself was actually a player in the latter days of HellRaisers. Gradually they all left HellRaisers, made Gambit. And now like HellRaisers is fucking whatever Oscar's old team used to be. So now what's ridiculous is they've just migrated to a new org basically. Now, first of all, when you ask, should Space guy removed? Here's the funny thing, okay? We've made jokes about this on E-League, but it's true. When they used to have Waylander and then they got Space, you almost never had to even comment on it because somehow, bizarrely, it's like he was just an invisible player, Never lost the game, never won the game,
just
sat in a
really
seat. It's like he sat in a seat and it was just like, okay, you pay me to give you exactly like insert number differential here. I will do that 9 hours a day. That is my job. I am Space. Like he just seemed to have nothing to him as a player now. So the real question is, like what do you know about Kucha at the moment? Because obviously he's been a guy who, I mean, HellRaisers hasn't been a good team for a long while. He's kind of, I mean, he just disappeared for a while from that team. Obviously, he has history back in CSGO. What do you think about adding Kucha to this Gambit team? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, I don't really have thoughts on Kucher in general. I mean, that team just they seem they're like that team that's just like a little bit dangerous for an upset here or there. They're good for like a one map win. They don't really strike me as like big heavy hitters. I mean, Adren is great. Mo I think is good. Doja has his games, but this team still just seems a little bit like kind of like a Space overall as a team, where I'm just kind of like look at them and I'm just like blah. They don't really strike me as too much. But I mean, Hooch, I thought he was. I mean, he's not like the best player in the world. I thought, once again, it's kind of like just what we talked about the flip side. He is the player that you'd think, Hooch or Space, those would be the guys that you drop off this team. So, I mean, hopefully it has some kind of an unlocking effect on Adren or Mo to make them better players.
Yeah, because that's the thing to me. Like, here's the thing: the Kucha pickup itself, I'm not a fan of, because I remember that HellRaisers like they had with almost all these players in towards the end. It was kind of lackluster, like on paper you kept looking. It's like you looked at the legacy of the names and you thought this should be a good team, but then in reality, there's a reason why they were sort of like tier 2 at that point in time and weren't really doing anything, and weren't qualifying for majors, for example. So instead, this is a team where, okay, the Kucha pickup, I can give him a pass there, try it out, like see what happens. Like Space wasn't some great player. The thing is though, that leads into the rumor. And the rumor is that Hooch is kicked and that it's Zeus that replaces him. So what do you think of if Zeus becomes the in-game leader of Gambit?
I don't. That's not bad at all. Obviously, that's a big upgrade. Obviously, having someone with any kind of in-game leading experience is huge right now, especially because of the coaching ruling. Obviously, so that would be cool to see Zeus, and also maybe that helps him because he's been on a team constantly where like he was never needed to have any firepower. So maybe he comes into this and has much more of a loose structure where Starks kind of always had them in that like cage, that machine, that Navi. Just very, very structured, very, you do this player does this, and then we go forward. If they come in with a loose style, maybe Zeus can have some kind of his skill unlocked as well. Maybe he becomes a better individual player. And then obviously they have some of the talent. Adren, we've seen him be a star player on this team. He's the one who, when they do upset like tier 1 teams on single maps, he's the one that's normally, at the top of that scoreboard. He's the one having the big impact, him and Mo. So Zeus coming in, that could be actually really interesting for this team to see them get to the next step where maybe they can challenge for some BO3s. Maybe they can start winning more of these BO1s, having more of these upsets, because they have still been a dangerous team despite some of the lack of skill compared to tier 1 teams.
Yeah, because the thing is, I actually do think that's a good pickup. Like, it's an obvious person to pick up because he's a real in-game leader. Like, something a lot of people don't know is, I don't know where this has come from, but I've seen a bunch of people talking about Hooch like he was some, like, legendary 1.6 in-game leader.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't, to my knowledge. Like, I followed the Russian scene pretty closely. He was, like, a decent player for a while. There was times when he was a good player a long time ago. But as far as I know, he wasn't even the in-game leader in most of those teams. And if he was, it was, like, a simple style, okay? It wasn't, like, a very... it wasn't some Blade, for example. Blade did have the rep in 1.6 as like mastermind type guy, very intricate tactics. That was always something following him around. So personally, when I looked at Gambit, I mean, I think Gambit's a perfect home for people like Kucha, Dosia, Adren, because in theory, these are players where they just decided a long time ago how they want to play CS, and they just want to basically, they're a comfort team, okay? They just want to do what they want to do, and they have a very simple style, and they just play it out, okay? They're not going to try something super new or invent something brand new. So I think in that sense, Hooch was okay as the in-game leader, but I definitely think Zeus can bring something new. The only thing that I think will be interesting is Zeus has a reputation, which is justified, by the way, where he is one of the few in-game leaders in CSGO who himself is a rager. Now, that's very rare, actually. If you look at a lot of in-game leaders, they're more like passive personalities, but they're good tactically, okay? So it's more like, I mean, Sean Gers, Pronax, these are guys where they just say, let's try something next round. Zeus himself would rage when people did things he didn't wanted him to do, okay? So here's the key detail I want everyone to watch out for if they ever see Gambit playing offline, is that Dosia looks to me, as an outsider, I don't speak Russian, like someone who is going to do whatever the fuck Dosia wants. And the rule is, do not criticize Dosia. So I want to see what happens in a world where Zeus makes some call, rotate now onto the side, like, come in behind. And Dosia, as usual, he has that shift key held down. He's walking. He's holding an angle. It's like, well, but there's not enough time to get the button. Listen, I'm waiting for this guy to come out. And if he comes out, I'm going to get this kill. If not, I'm saving this gun. Like, I want to see what happens when those two meet, okay? Because that could be fun, at least. Just as a side point.
As long as we get those gifs of Doja just, like, licking his lips over and over repeatedly like some kind of sexual frog, I'm all about him staying on this team. I want him around forever.
This might sound like a mad comment, okay? This might sound out of order, Moses. I'm just saying, okay? Hashtag just saying. But if I had to pick someone in CS who looks like they might be some sort of mad sexual predator, what do you want me to say? The gifs out there are just unreal, aren't they? Like,
what was the one from E-League where he was like, it looked like he was just like fucking ejaculating in the middle of a round?
You mean where he was just working his wrist, like, and he was like...
it's
unreal,
unreal.
Wasn't it? Absolutely unreal, yeah.
Oh, God.
And obviously, the key detail again, people might be like, Gambit, why are you talking about all these lower teams? Mate, these are all seed 2 teams for the major. Welcome to fucking the darkest timeline you will ever experience. So remember, that's also why for Zeus, it's a very smart decision, because if he joins this team, he actually gets to automatically be in a pretty decent group in the major. I mean, assuming you don't get fucked by seed 4 being some G2 type motherfuckers. But the other detail to mention is other people were wondering, would he join Flipside? Now, as we've kind of outlined, it was obvious to me he wouldn't, because if he joins Flipside, then what happens to Blade? Like, that's the real issue there. You know, it made more sense to join Gambit because, like I say, in terms of the person you're replacing, it's not out of the world. They'd remove him, and you're also in a situation where now also, even if you're Zeus, the upside is you're also playing with a lot of veterans. Like, you know all these people, you've been to events with them all. So I think in terms of personality, it makes more sense to go that way. So, yeah, I think that's it on the Gambit thing. Okay, so now we've got an event to talk about. It's an event that I did. It was the Gfinity CSGO Invitational. And the basics of it is, it was basically the exact same as the tournament they ran last year around a similar time, which is called Champion of Champions, which was just before DreamHack Cluj-Napoca. And that was a tournament where they had... It was Fnatic, EnVyUs, and VP had all won events. Actually, yes, VP had won G3. And what happened is NiP hadn't won an event, but they needed a 4th team. And obviously NiP in history are champions. So they had a sick lineup for that tournament. Now, first of all, I think you can tell why they didn't call this Champion of Champions Part 2, because if you see the team lineup. But it's essentially the same format, which is each team plays the best of 5, and then you go into the final, and that's the best of 5 too. So the 4 teams was EnVyUs, Godsent, the brand new Godsent, Mouse Sports, brand new with Oscar at the time, and Epsilon Esports. So for anyone who doesn't know Epsilon Esports, it's the Swedish lineup with Disco Doppler, Draken, those guys. So not a bad sort of team who's come into the Tier 2 range now, and actually are looking like they can threaten to take maps of Tier 1. So this was an event that kind of like flew under the radar a little bit, but it was actually like a surprisingly solid one. Because again, you look at Godsent, EnVyUs, Mousesport, they're all within the same realm right now. Like EnVyUs hasn't looked great for a while. Godsent had done nothing, obviously, offline or online. And Mouse, sure, they're at the top of the tier 2 teams and edging into tier 1, but they only just got Oscar, so even then you didn't know what was going to happen. So, I mean, coming into this event, I had EnVyUs picked to win it anyway. Basically what happened, a quick run through. Envy played Epsilon. Epsilon actually shockingly won Cobblestone with this weird comeback, but it was on CT side, and it was when they were running double AWP on Cobblestone. So if that doesn't tell you that basically EnVyUs sort of helped that out, and it was a bunch of basically hitting a bunch of crazy shots, then, I mean, that should be the assumption, and basically that is right. Like, they still only won 16-14. Then there was a crazy game on Cash, where inexplicably EnVyUs only managed to win in overtime there, despite the fact they're monsters on Cash, you know? Remember, Cash and Cobble are the best EnVyUs maps, so this was already looking like, holy shit, is Epsilon actually going to have a chance to upset them? But the interesting part for me was, on the 4th map was Nuke. And actually, it turned out that even though Epsilon with their old in-game leader had been pretty good on Nuke, that EnVyUs actually told me they had been practicing Nuke, and they actually wrecked Nuke, basically. Like, they had a super strong CT side, they just wrecked the map outright, and they actually had 9 rounds on T side as well. So they won that one. The others, that series, it doesn't have too much to comment on. I mean, Epsilon for me, it's like, okay, congrats, you got to go forwards before we can really say much more about you, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the one takeaway I had from it, because this was one of the series I caught from this event, was Disco Doppelin. I mean, between his performance in NIP online, and then he had a pretty solid series against Envy, all things considered, the only player on his team to go positive. Just another emerging young Swedish talent. Like, when is he going to get his chance in a bigger team? Or how long will Epsilon actually be able to take the next step? Because that's what it's going to take to keep someone like him. I mean, he seems to be very, very skilled. He seems to be pretty well respected among the pros in Sweden. And if they can't take that next step and actually be able to win some series consistently against tier 1 teams, at some point someone's going to come to him and say, hey, let's try it out. Let's bring you up into the big leagues and let's see what you got. So that was the one takeaway for me from Epsilon. In terms of Envy, yeah, I mean, that was just kind of them doing business in this series, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one where they kept asking me on the desk, like, oh, does this mean something really significant that EnVyUs has dropped the map and that was so close? And I said, unfortunately, of all the teams you're going to talk about, EnVyUs are the perfect example of a team that's like, we will peak once we get to the final. Like, as long as, here's the thing, if it takes a 16-14 to win a game, EnVyUs will do that rather than be super prepared and then win 16-8 and have everything on point and never take a mistake and never do a stupid force buy. So I don't think it really matters that it was so close. It obviously didn't in the final anyway. In terms of Epsilon, the one downside I have for this tournament, because obviously you can look at the form and go, okay, cool, you won a map, you almost won another map. That's great, I agree. The big drop-off for me, though, was when I did my research on them, I had Draken as the best player in that team. Like, Disco Doppler and Draken are the 2 stars, but Draken, when I watched him play against Tier 2, was very consistent, and he had, like, really solid AWPing. He was that type of AWPer where he doesn't have to do the highlight rounds. It just gets you the 1 or 2 kills in the spots where he should, right? So I thought, right, if he goes ham at this event, they don't have to win the series, but that's a perfect advertisement if he's going to move on, you know? Like, right. Listen, Godsent might need a skilled player one day, and IP might need a player. So that's exactly where you get a chance to really kind of show your mettle. And unfortunately, he was a bit underwhelming in this series, actually. Like, he had, like, maybe a map where he was good. That was about it, though. So that's kind of a downside to me, because, again, I don't expect these teams to win, but you have to be a bit cynical. You have to think, if you're a player like that, like, this is my audition, basically, to join a better team if I do my job.
Yeah, well, unfortunately as well. I mean, this is kind of a bummer for me to even say, but he did go up against Kenny S, who had one of his rare, or not, maybe not rare, but one of his infrequent, like, really solid performances. Like, he was good in this series. He was 88 and 66 as an AWPer. I mean, obviously, probably, teaching Draken some lessons, like, beating him up a little bit with the AWP. So that's always the tough part as an AWPer, I think, if you have to go up against Kenny S and he's feeling it, because he doesn't always do it these days. You could see Kenny in matches sometimes just, like, doesn't do well with the AWP. In this game, he had great impact. So maybe a little bit unfortunate. I think this is also would have been cool for, I mean, I know this is just the format of this Gfinity. And also, I mean, it's just great for Epsilon to have the chance to be there to compete with these teams, but it would have been cool to see Epsilon not only play Envy, to be able to see them play at Mousesports or at Godsent and see what else they had against some of the other teams, especially at Godsent, where they probably play them in practice, so maybe they're feeling a little bit more comfortable against that team.
Yeah, and the other semi-final, I mean, obviously there's only 4 teams, but it is the semi-final, was Godsent against Mouse. And now, interestingly enough, I already went into this with Mouse called, because I have to say, what I've seen from Godsent so far,
not good.
I don't know where the improvement's going to come from, basically. And so even though Mousesports aren't world beaters, this was the Mousesports that added Oscar in. Now, I will say in this series, And for the tournament, Oscar was pretty underwhelming for this LAN, actually. And obviously, we've got some news coming that he's out of mouse sports. Like, I really thought he was going to be better, but the key detail that was interesting, maybe touching on what I said before about switching people's roles up, is that Oscar coming into the team somehow... This series, bizarrely, sparked Dennis and Spiddy to go ham. They actually had some maps where they went fucking nuts. And so as a result, amazingly, think of the lineups of these two teams. Mouse Sports, man for man, outskilled Godsent. That was the sickest part of it. Like, it wasn't just that they won. They actually were legit. Like, their worst players were beating up Crims, JW. Like, basically, Flusher's the only guy in Godsent who looked like he could do anything, you know.
I mean, this is the question with Godsent right now that we have, which is so crazy to think about, is it's like, where is the power? Where's the impact on this team when they have JW and they have Crims and they have Flusha? Like, where's all the killing gone? I mean, JW's been a little bit weakened for a while. Crims is notoriously a very passive player, so he's not going to necessarily take over any games like individually by himself. And then really when you look at it, the other star you have to think was going to have to pick his game up was Schneider, and he had a terrible series here. Yeah, I mean, this Godsent team just seems, they have no identity. They seem to have, despite going to Pronax, where everyone kind of, when this change happened, was like, okay, these guys are going back to Pronax, this legendary in-game leader, brilliant tactician. He hasn't like instilled any kind of a structure with this team, I feel like, yet. Like, they don't have anyone who consistently is in positions to make the plays they need. So I mean, I think that this Godsent team, it's looking like a failed experiment really, really early on.
Yeah. And then also add in that essentially the only positive is that they have the major spot. I mean, I think there was some other land they said they just qualified for. Do you remember what that was? It said they'd qualified for something.
No, I can check that really quick. Let's check out the messages.
Just have a quick check. But anyway, basically, I agree with you. Like, right now, I realise it's only 2 lands in and a bunch of online games, but it's very rare you will ever see a team do as badly across all of that when they start out. You know, there's got to be some positives. At the moment, there aren't any. So the big issue for me is, like, okay, this will sound like a diss, so I'll go ahead and say it. I'll just say outright that for everyone who... Okay, whenever there's teams like Fnatic and SK and in the past teams like EnVyUs, and they have players on him who look godlike, right? And then I contrast that player with a really good player like a Simple when he was in Flipside, or like Nico in Mousebots. You know, whenever I compare those players, I mean, you've done this yourself, so I'm going to bring you into this, but it's a general thing. The community will say, well, maybe, yeah, that player looks sick, but, you know, maybe it's also his fault that the team's not winning. Maybe he's selfish, or maybe he doesn't make his teammates better. Now, while it's not that I don't think it's possible to make your teammates better, I do think sometimes people go too far both directions. Like, for example, they'll say, oh, the reason SK is so good, though, is because Cold Zero's made, like, you know, Fur better or whatever the fuck, you know. Or they'll go, oh, Nico, maybe he's too selfish. That's what holds the mouse back. Now, remember, the problem with that is everyone told me that Flusher was this godlike player, best player in the world last year at some point, and, you know, he was like best statistical player at the majors. Well, guess what? Flusher's still playing really well, guys. He's playing probably better than he did in Fnatic over the last few months. But Godsent is a bag of steaming dog shit. So if you want to have that theory, time to start applying it to Flusher, because I don't personally, like, I look at it and I go, I'm sorry, like, I feel bad for Flusher because he's playing very well. He's kind of backed himself in through friendship and politics into a bad scenario he probably is not going to get out of, because he's probably not just going to up sticks and go to NIP or something, you know. So unfortunately, I think he's probably fucked himself. But I think this is just a good example of where, like, the team's problems are not one player. Like, they've got about 10 problems that are the whole team, basically, and Flusher's not one of them. But you can't just apply that logic, you know, where the star gets the blame in that sense, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, no, he doesn't get the blame, but I mean, just the team in it as a whole. I'm not like either. I'm just looking at this roster even now, and it's like Pronax is that old school in-game leader where you're not going to get that individual production out of him. You might get an impact round here or there, but obviously he's never going to put up a high number of frags. And you just have no playmakers on this team. Like, JW is supposed to be a playmaker, and his style of playmaking just doesn't work anymore. So I think he's struggled for a long time with that, trying to find some way to have the impact he used to, especially early on in rounds. So yeah, like I said, Schneider's the next one up, and he's been awful recently. I mean, it's actually even interesting with Godsent. They, even before this lineup change happened, maybe this is like an issue with Pronax, and I hate to say that because I've always really, really loved Pronax, but his team, like, they had that one good event. They had Malmo, where Godsent reached the semis, almost beat NIP, almost made it into the grand finals against Navi. But outside of that one DreamHack Malmo, even when they had Twist, and even when they had Lekro, I mean, this team, like, didn't really do anything outside of Malmo. So maybe there's you got to almost at some point say, okay, so the system that they're playing, it just isn't working, because they've had the talent multiple times. And I think right now it's just a product of the simple not being, or the system not being that good, and the talent just underperforming in general right now. Like they have a lot of issues going on. And like you said, they're kind of locked into this. That's what sucks, is because this is one of those players-owned organizations where I think they all have shares in Godsent now. Like, they all have ownership.
Also, if you want to keep that major spot, you have to keep literally the three that came over. That's the worst part, right?
Well, I mean, you only have to keep it for what, another 3 months or so, and then you can see what happens.
Mate, 3 months can look pretty bad. Remember the early Cloud9 early this year?
Yeah.
That could be messy. So no, the problem I think is like, I'll put it on both ends, like the system and the players. Because first of all, I will say, like, Crims is in a mad slump. Like, I don't know why. That's not Frorax's fault. He can't get him out of that. But individually, he was in a slump at Fnatic anyway. He's in a slump now. Then you've got to add in that they keep using that like phrasing of like, oh, what we're going to do is like, JW is going to become the old JW and he's going to go back to AWPing all the time. That all sounds great until you really stop and think, wait a minute. When JW did that AWPing, the logic was he put map pressure on, okay, and he fucked with the enemy. Now, if he died, they had Prime, Olafmeister, Crims, and Flusher. So think about, unsurprisingly, those three players can make up for being in a 4v5.
Absolutely.
If JW dies now, you've basically got Flusher. That's it. Other than that, you've got like OK Schneider and you've got slumping Crims. So, that they're not going to win. If they're in a 4v5 versus a tier 1 team, they're going to lose the 4v5 because they have a disadvantage, So I think, unfortunately, you add those factors together, and at the moment, there's no logical reason why Godsent should get much better than they are at the moment. Like, at the moment, they look to me like, even if they get their shit together, they're going to be like the 11th best team in the world, I have no reason to think they'll ever get much better,
Yeah. I mean, it would have to take some mad level. I feel like JW of getting back to his like really, really like long ago form, where he was like just that dominant, jumping out of Inferno balcony and getting 3 kills or something. It would take. I think the only person who's going to really improve this team to a crazy level would be JW hitting some massive peak, and we just haven't seen that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the style, like the way the changes to the game have worked over the years. Just nerfing him individually, just by the way they are. So yeah, I don't have a lot of high hopes for this team from what I've seen so far. It's actually kind of a bummer, I used to love watching Crims, but I mean, even Mouse Sports. I mean, looking over, Nico's still a beast. I'm trying to figure out maybe Speedy and Dennis get unlocked, because with Chris J and Oscar, like that was the big question mark for me because like we knew for a long time that Oscar was going to join this team. I mean, that was like the worst kept secret in all of professional Counter-Strike. I always thought it was going to be Chris J that would be out, just because Oscar's an opper. Like, what are we doing? Chris J and Oscar, two primary oppers. I mean, maybe that's the thing. Neither of them are doing that great, so maybe it's Speedy and Dennis who just naturally going to pick up the slack.
Because the problem was, since Chris J actually, to his credit, had some pretty solid results in the time between when they agreed to get Oscar and when they were deciding who got kicked, I think it was one of those scenarios where he played himself back into the team,
Yeah. So he did have a great E-League. He had a really good E-League.
So in that sense, I know what you mean. Like, personally, role for role, it would be the obvious switch. But for whatever reason, they went with Nex. Now, by the way, kicking Nex is fine. I think he's mega overrated, even though he's come back now. But amazingly, not only did those players play better, but what was so bizarre is Oscar was just so underwhelming here, mate. Like, even his AWPing was just very average,
Yeah, I mean, this tournament for him wasn't very good at all. I don't know why. I mean, maybe it has to do with Chris J. I mean, maybe it leads into why he's now stepped off that starting roster, where they said personal issues. Maybe he's really been clashing with the fact that he's not like the big dick opper in town. Because I mean, on HellRaisers, he was like the shit, He was the guy that was going to win them matches, and now he's on this team, and he's maybe got to share time with Chris J. They both want the AWP. They both want the prime opping positions as well. So it's got to be pretty awkward, I would imagine.
And the other thing is, like, okay, so we'll obviously lead into that topic we're talking about now. We can skip forward a bit, which is that this news has now come out that Mouse has lost him indefinitely. Now, when you say indefinitely, what's weird about that is, technically, that term just means, like, there's no definite date for when they return, right? So in theory, that means it could all be fine. He could still come back. Now, by the way, he is still under contract, so that's true. But the word now comes out that also he just won't come back. This is it. Basically, that's done.
Yeah.
And at the moment, they've got Nex back. So here's the big problem for me, is that if their whole plan is to use like fucking League of Legends Riot memes. Like, they are just going to reverse the transfer and bring him back. That's a fucking nightmare, because I hated watching that Mouse Sports team, because that literally was just a prison for a really good player with no way out, basically, with that lineup, that is. Now, with that said, like, basically, Mouse right now is like what Godsent is, but with a worse player in Flusher than Nico, in terms of like individually hard carrying the whole game. You know, it's not going to do it as much. So the problem is, if they're going to bring Next back permanently, that's dog shit. Like, I don't care about that Mouse team anymore. With that said, if there's at least some option in the future to, okay, we'll bring him back Next now, but we're going to figure out someone else to be the fifth player. You know, maybe we can get a phase player. So, you know, if they could do that, fair enough. Then I'm down with it. But I have to say, it's really sad to me that they only got one LAN with Oscar. Like, I hope this was going to be like, you know, let's see like 3 or 4 months, and then we'll see what both are made of. Like, we'll see what Mouse is made of when they have more talent. I'm sure that would help someone like Nico know if he needs to stay there or not. And also, then let's see what Oscar's like. You know, is he legit on tier 1? I wanted to see.
This is what's so weird about it, is like this roster move was like 3 months in the making. They had to like wait for his contract to fucking end. Like, they had actually like dedicated so much time, and like just like sitting there idle, just like, you know, in neutral, just, you know, getting the same, you know, underwhelming performances at tournaments, with the understanding that they would have Oscar in like two months or whenever his contract, in 2 or 3 months. So now that he comes in and he's gone after 1 weekend, this is what's crazy about this announcement, because I'm so confused. And I know, I mean, this is probably what I shouldn't do, but it makes, I mean, to a certain degree, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Is you know, people tweeting or people on Reddit saying, you know, maybe this is like a death in the family. And I mean, but the way these releases were like phrased, like, people were telling me it was like a personal, like, emergency issue that he'd have to sit out for something like major happen in his life. And I'm just like, but why is Mouse Sports saying he's benched? Why is Mouse Sports saying he's gone indefinitely? Why aren't they just saying? Yeah.
Why would you ever say that thing about, like, he probably won't return? Like, if someone dies, you go, okay, listen, take as much time as you need. We'll be here for you. You don't say, like, by the way, you fucking never come back. Like, what? There's no way that happened.
Just to pile more on your life, you are never coming back.
You know what? Take a few offs. In fact, fuck it. Take a few years off, mate. Get the fuck out of this thing. Come on, man. I don't think they do that when someone's died.
No, like, fuck no. I mean, that's what's so crazy. But you know, this is just like, that was a pretty harsh release. Like, he is benched indefinitely. We will be bringing Next back due to personal reasons. So I don't know. I never thought of Oscar. I've never heard anything about him like having some kind of crazy like simple complex, or like people just couldn't get along with him, or people like just hated playing with him. So I don't know what it might be, but I think it's got to stem from maybe the fact that there's 2 primary oppers in this team, and they just didn't know how to make it work. I think that's got to be what it is.
Okay. Because the interesting thing about this tournament, now obviously that we're going to talk about the champions, which is EnVyUs. In this tournament, it's funny. This is such... If you're someone like me, okay, everyone knows my favorite CSGO team of all time is actually, believe it or not, the Titan team that was like Kenny S in God mode, and then unfortunately, because at the time they had RPK, he was kind of like trapped. Like, obviously, Kaylee used to be a fantastic player. They had to go to RPK, who was brand new. And so really the reason they didn't win titles is just because they were literally in the process of being good enough to win titles, trying to coach a player in how to play fucking CSGO, while they had one of the best in-game leaders and one of the best AWPers. So the sick thing was, it was one of the best teams to watch, but at the same time was when EnVyUs was at their peak. This is when they actually briefly were, like, you know, could really contend with Fnatic. Like, it's funny, now you will rightly think of, like, all of 2015 and late 2014 as the Fnatic era, right? Because they won the most titles, they won the most majors, etc. But there was a period up until kind of Itse where it really was in contention. Like, this might be the Fnatic EnVyUs era. Like, you know, these two battled with each other, and they shared the crowns, and they took the titles each, and it was like, okay, you know, one of those two is going to win everything. But what's funny is, in this era, when Titan was like very good individual player, but they're like getting the semis and they're always going to lose, meanwhile EnVyUs is winning all the tournaments, the EnVyUs players themselves were really arrogant. Like, if you ever brought up Kennyus and whatnot, they'd just be like, well, yeah, he's good, but I mean, you know, he's overrated because, you know, like, the team just plays around him, and, you know, like, if he was in a different team, like, you know, say ours, for example, you know, he wouldn't be able to do any of that stuff. Well, at this tournament, it was literally the 2 stars of that Titan team, Apex and Kenny S, who carried everyone in EnVyUs' bitch ass to this title. They were like the 2 primary carries in every game, pretty much. And what's mad is, in the final especially, it was like old school Titan or some shit. Except, this time, Apex wasn't even inconsistent. What's mad is, for this event, his stats were unreal, mate. He had like one of the best lands he's ever had. Like, every game, basically, he was on like, you know, like 100 ADR or something mental, you know. So, you add in those 2, and what's funny is, for once, EnVyUs of all teams actually had some consistency. You know where you're gonna get what from what players.
Yeah, well, I mean, Apex is just that player where when he's on, like, he just wins games. Like, it's like one of those default wins. Like, you can almost just call it if you see that he's just going to be on fire for a series. You're just like, all right, it's over. You might as well just not even play the maps. So yeah, that consistency over words is sick. But yeah, I mean, this I think this is what the big problem with this Envy lineup, and it's kind of funny because it actually mirrors the Godsent lineup, where we say, look at these old stars that were dominant for so long in CS:GO. Happy at one point, like when they won the major as LDLC, he was like the best player in the world for like a couple months. He was insane individually. That was before Olaf emerged, obviously. And then NBK, who is like one of my favorite players to watch when he's on point, because he was so dominant early on in CS:GO and very games and in all the different fresh lineups. And these guys just don't seem to be at the same level that they used to for whatever reason. So we keep talking about this team where it's like, much like Godsent, we're like, look at all this skill that they have, that we know their skill from the past, but it's just underachieving. Well, it's been underachieving for so long now. This team really is like, once again, Apex and Kenny, like one of them has to hard carry this lineup. It's so weird how this has happened to some of like the oldest and the best stars consistently in CS:GO, the Godsent guys. Now we have Happy, NBK, like these guys are no longer hitting that level where they're super effective and super impactful players. I think that's the real issue with Envy right now, is they just have people who don't seem to like want to take over games anymore, who don't want to win games no matter what they say.
Okay, and yeah, that's the issue for me. So we'll tie this again with the newest piece of information, which is that despite winning that event, EnVyUs has decided to bring Sixer in and kick out Devil. Now, everyone who's followed recent tournaments knows they used Sixer when they were at Star Series, which is where they made it to play G2. I think it was the round of 8 where they lost.
They used him for NBK, right?
Yeah, and at the time, Sixer was pretty decent, but obviously it wasn't instead of Devil. That's a key detail to add initially. It was instead of NBK, as you say, they still had Devil at that tournament. Yep. Now, Sixer is someone who was around for a long time in 1.6. He played in many, many teams. And towards the end of 1.6, he was a pretty good AWPer. But the problem was, French teams at the end of 1.6 were not relevant, basically. They were nearly always just like, if there was like a 16-team tournament, like a World Champions, okay, they're going to make it because France has a spot, but they're going to go out in the group stage, or they're going to make this round of 16 if it's a bracket, They're not going to go further. They're not going to get super deep. And partly, by the way, because all the French talent at the time played in Source, and that's actually where in the Source they were the best, apparently, like Very Games, etc.
Yep.
But put it this way, Sixer's not some player where, like, he's not like an Oscar where it demands that he gets onto a tier 1 team eventually, and it's an obvious pickup, blah blah blah. In fact, no one's really brought his name up. When we all think of who can they get, I mean, the EnVyUs themselves didn't go to this guy. Everyone went to the LDLC boys. They got Body and they got Devil. This guy wasn't on anyone's radar. So here's the thing: on one level, it's kind of, I agree with Lurpus on Twitter, it's a little bit of an underwhelming pickup in as much as like, well, this doesn't fix all your problems as EnVyUs. It definitely doesn't make you potential world #1 again, which is what you've got to be going for. But one of the things I did say to Lurpus on Twitter is, mate, he is replacing Devil. Like, essentially, he doesn't have to do a lot, and it still wouldn't be his fault that they lost the game. So I think it's a decent upgrade. Bearing in mind, here's one detail I will reveal, which is if you ever go and look at the history of when the teams signed with the people, okay? So if you remember, EnVyUs joined EnVyUs like after the MLG, which was like at the end of January. So let's say early February is when they're EnVyUs, okay? And then actually G2 joined G2 around early February. So expect the contracts to run out in early February, which is when the French shuffle should happen. So to me, you've got to take that into account. It's not like they had the choice to get Shocks and they were like, no, get Sixer instead. What they're doing now is, I think G2 and EnVyUs are just going to keep these lineups, well, this one with Sixer in the team, and they're going to run it out. They're going to see what happens at the next major, they're going to see what happens at the next tournaments, IEM Open, whatever, whichever one they're playing at, and they're just going to see in February, after the next major, then you'll have the French shuffle. So with all that in mind, what do you think of this move?
I don't care about the move, to be honest with you. It's what you said. It's like, I mean, I saw you say it on Twitter, and it's what I always said about Devil is like, he doesn't need to be some kind of big time player because they have 4 other stars with massive amounts of talent. And this is just the same thing. It's just like you're replacing Devil with another player who's not going to doesn't seem to have a huge impact. Yeah, he's got some experience. He'll probably be better in clutch situations. He'll probably make less mistakes, but it's not really adding a whole lot to your team. So, I mean, it still doesn't change any of the problems they have, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to improve anything in this team whatsoever. I actually think that French shuffle could happen earlier, to be honest with you. I don't know, because I think if you look at both of these teams playing through that major qualifier, which is essentially going to be major in and of itself, I think both teams are looking at that qualifier and just saying, we better fucking make the major. Like, whatever it takes, we're making the major. And I think there are going to be players who want to get off of these teams just in order to be confident in going through that qualification process. I don't think these teams could just sit around like this. G2 may be fine. That's the big issue for Envy, is that G2 may be fine if they have Shocks and Scream hitting a level, if RPK still plays strongly, and if Body continues to be consistent on a decent level. So, I mean, they have some options on that team to be able to make it regardless, but this Envy team, I don't know if I entirely see them making the major. Like, you can't just rely on Apex and Kenny to carry you through the whole qualifier.
Like, I still think it's doable for both to qualify. My main issue is, like, based on the things I've heard, I mean, I would imagine a lot of this comes from the G2 side of things, but it's like G2 as an org, if you've noticed their history, want to make a lot of money from everything they do. So they're not just going to give you a player. And even if it goes the other way, even if EnVyUs somehow agreed to do the deal, it's still, these are teams that are competing, and there's no reason for EnVyUs to gift a player to G2. So the problem I see with it is, I know the players would make the move, but the finances might not. Because you have to realize, for people who don't know this, we're at the level now where if you want a Kenny S or a Shocks, it's going to cost you like 200k, 150k buyout. That's no joke. That's literally what it'll cost you. So what you might do in this scenario, especially for your G2, is like, okay, we've still got a pretty good team. Let's just see if they really do bomb out at the next major, and we'll get the free buyout where his contract just ends, and we save 150k. And the difference is G2 does have a good enough team where you can at least play it out still.
I guess the question would be, how much is it worth it to get to a major that is going to be on American television? Is it worth that gamble for the 150k? Like, if you do good in the major and you're going to be on television at some point, you're going to be on TBS, that might be worth the money for it. I think that for a team like G2 especially, to have bombed out the way that they did in New York is unreal. That like cannot ever happen for that team, in my opinion. And I think that's either going to be a wake-up call or just like a kick in the dick for those players, where they might have like one more tournament where they're like, what the fuck are we even doing? Like, if they don't do well, I think their next event is that Epic LAN? Epicenter, yeah. Ooh, how did I get that wrong? But yeah, Epicenter. If they do bad at Epicenter, I think that's going to be, I think that'll speed up the process very, very much.
Actually, let me check. Maybe that was what Godsent qualified for.
Oh yeah, Godsent. The recent matches they had, the ECS Development League, I think was the last two they won.
But Epicenter, which apparently is in,
it's in like 2 weeks, isn't it?
2 weeks. It's actually pretty stacked, I have to say. It's in Russia, and it has Fnatic, G2, Na'Vi, NiP, SK, Virtus.Pro, Dignitas, and an unknown CIS team. That's pretty fucking fire, I have to say.
And I'm not gonna fucking be there. Mother of God.
I mean,
that was
mate.
That's the event.
Jesus Christ! It has 250k first place.
Yeah, it's dude. The event is insane. This is the event that did that Dota tournament where they built like a Roshan in there.
I remember that, but that's Roshan, fucking sick money.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Jesus Christ. Well, I won't speculate on where that money came from.
Let's not go there.
So, move along. Anyway, that's a few weeks, so we can get that later. Okay, so yeah, you're right. There'll be Epicenter for them. No, you're right. That's the thing. There's enough tournaments where G2, in theory, could even know by the offline qualifier. Because I have to say, one thing I do think is ridiculous is I think people have overhyped G2's failures. Like, I saw someone. Here's the thing. Okay, because G2 in League of Legends right now is sucking a mad dick at international tournaments, and in some other games that I'm not aware of, people said they were doing badly. I saw people like, oh, G2's entire org has failed massively. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What? When have they failed in CSGO? Okay, yeah, New York, I agree. That's bad. Best of ones. They lost like 3 best of ones. Okay, great. Then you got to add in the major. Right? The major is the ultimate. There's very few teams that can ever give a true get out of jail free card in a group major. They've got the best one of all time.
Yeah.
They had 2 of the best top 4 teams in the world in their group, including
and a FaZe team, which is super dangerous in BO1s.
Exactly, and one, by the way, which is so dominant in SK that no one fucking beats them in majors. So fuck off. That doesn't count as a failure. That's just you got fucked completely by the draw. Yep. Remember, in their spot, they could have been in like fucking the group that had Na'Vi and NiP, for example. Right there, they have chances in both those games. Or they could have been in Group A. That was fucking Astralis, and who else was who's C2 in Group A? Astralis. CLG. Dude, imagine they get that group. They're fucking out of that group immediately. We all know that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can't blame on that one. The only real failure they've had is basically this New York tournament, because even at E-League, okay, they probably would have gone through the last chance qualifier if they had PK, they had body, so they had Fuchs instead. So I don't blame them for any of this. If you look at their actual run, it's just that the major was the biggest moment. That's the problem. And then ESL was a very big tournament. So the problem is, I agree, the pressure of the moment makes it look really bad. But put it this way, I wouldn't be panicking yet. I'd definitely say, let's give this a couple more tournaments with this lineup and see what you can do. Because if they keep doing well elsewhere, not a problem. You can still be a great team. I think they're still a sick team.
Yeah, no, I think they're still very, very good. I just think I think mentally with French teams, especially because they have this whole idea that the French shuffle is going to happen no matter what, and I know those conversations have occurred. That it's like when you have all this adding up, and you're starting to do bad in events as well. Like when you're making it like second place or at Pro League finals, when you're winning ECS Season 1 championship, like everything feels great, and you're doing really good in these tournaments. If you start stringing together a couple really big underperformances, that's when the weight of everything. That's when you're like, oh yeah, we've had these conversations. Kenny may want out, whatever it might be. I don't actually know if that's true, so don't hold me to that. Reddit, Twitter, fuckers. But when you start having those thoughts, and then you're like, oh, Smiths hasn't been playing well, and then all these different things kind of adding up, and then you look ahead and you're like, oh, the major qualifier is essentially a major. We have to fight all these insane teams. Then you start saying, okay, what the fuck are we doing here? Why are we just bombing out? Why are we just sitting here and doing nothing, not improving? This team is not working the way it is. And I think that's when you start to get pressure to make some kind of a change. So I think they're in that dangerous part where the snowball is starting to form in that sense. And I think Epicenter is going to be a big test to see which way it goes, if they can get back on track or if that snowball just continues to grow.
Yeah. So, okay. What did you actually think of them going out 0-3 at ESL? Okay, because they lost to Astralis on Dust 2, which is a big comeback. Dust 2 obviously famously one of them amazing G2 maps. Liquid was on Train, which I'll say for both teams is kind of like a middling map, and then you had Optic on Cash, which itself, that's the biggest shock, right? Because the difference is Dust 2 and Cash, that is G2, okay? So if they're playing Optic on Cash, now Optic say, our Cash is very good, yeah, on the internet, fucker, against North Americans, shut the fuck up. The difference is, on paper, for all the people laughing, haha, Thorin and Yanko got it wrong. Yeah, well, first of all, that's good if you say Thorin. You can hate on me because I'm a popular figure to hate. What, Yanko doesn't know the game, doesn't he? Does he not know? Did he not play about 100 times better than all you fuckers and watch every demo? So the point is, the Optic Cash one's the one that no one can really... that's the really unacceptable one. What do you think overall about this 0-3, though, that they did?
I think it's really bad, especially because it's against Astralis as well, who hasn't really been performed. They're not necessarily a strong team. Liquid, there were so many question marks. Optic, we've never even seen this lineup on LAN. We knew they'd been playing good online, but I mean, this is what's kind of fucked up about it. Is this Swiss system is designed to prevent upsets in BO1 ways. It's designed to make the best teams go through, and for them to go 0-3 in it, and the fashion as well, 16-7 losses to Optic and Liquid. I mean, it's not like end of the world type thing, but it is very, very bad, and that's got to be a shit feeling if you're a G2 player coming out of that event in New York, just getting bodied like this. I thought it was, especially on a map like Cash, which is supposed to be one of their stronger ones. That to me is one of their go-to maps. To get destroyed like that is very, very scary. Same with Dust 2, and just it didn't seem like they just didn't look like the G2 that we've seen. So, I mean, in one way, I think it's terrible. In the other way, I'm just all right, they obviously underperformed. It's not like they got super outplayed in the sense that, everyone is on point and they just got beat tactically, or the Optic or Liquid players just outskilled them. I think literally it was just a case of the Shocks or the G2 players just not doing well at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is an example of a tournament where if you actually go through and look at all the stats, etc., basically, Body was pretty bad. He was the one person who was consistently bad. RPK was kind of off. Scream was pretty good the whole time. Shocks had mostly good maps. So, okay, remember, the formula for that team is it's got to be Shocks and Scream have to go ham. That's step one. If you don't have step one, they're not going to have a chance. Then step two is always RPK has to be pretty good. And then, it's no joke, for Body and Smiths, the job is just do not die and basically don't feed. That's their job.
Well, it's don't make mistakes,
I mean, so listen, as crazy as it seems, after seeing enough tournaments, we know that step one's fine. That can happen. Shocks and Scream can just both go ham. That can happen. RPK doing pretty well. Okay, maybe that's not as certain, but it seems to happen, say 60% of the time. Yep. And usually, both of those guys don't feed. Like, usually one can feed, essentially. One can do badly and the other one does that. So I think, unfortunately, that's why I'm not that convinced by this performance that it's like the end for this team or whatever. Like, I think it was kind of a bit of an anomaly. I will say this, though. The one thing that is bad is, like, if you told me before the tournament they're going to play Dust 2, Cash, and Train, I'd say, right, well, it's fine. They're definitely going to win 2 out of those 3 at least, because Dust 2 and Cash are their best maps, and Train is the one where when they're rolling, they can add that in, that becomes like a 3rd or 4th map. So I have to say the pick ban went super in their favor, I think, and so that's what distresses me. And also, obviously, it's also different if you'd lost to SK and Na'Vi and VP. You didn't. You lost to Astralis and Optic. Like, the Liquid one, okay, I'll give you that. Liquid turned out to be great. Astralis and Optic, you're supposed to be beating them if you're G2. So I agree, overall, a bad result, but I'm not that convinced that it's like a big deal yet. I want to see the next line.
It's definitely just the first step to becoming a big deal. It's not like, I even talked to some of the G2 guys at the after party, and I mean, even them were just like, yeah, this was like that slap in the face, that like bucket of cold water that wakes you up and realizes, you have issues that you need to work on. So the big thing for them was like, they weren't necessarily like dejected and like run down and like in tears or anything like that, but it was very much like, okay, now we have to get our shit together for the next event. This is like, you just got punched in the face, now how do you respond to it, type thing.
Okay, and what's interesting is, sorry, this is actually a separate topic, but there was actually a LAN in China that Renegades went to, right? And in this, like, for context, there was no TyLoo, because TyLoo was taking place in a different tournament that won them like an IESF spot, and TyLoo obviously wins everything in China. So what happened was, in the final of this tournament, it was Vici, the team that upset... let me think who it was. Who the fuck did they upset at Star Series? Because I know it was TyLoo who beat Astralis. So who did Vici beat? Virtus.Pro, I think, maybe. I think VP on Mirage. Okay, Vici Gaming, the one with Savage, etc., played against Renegades in the final, and actually Vici Gaming won. And this was for good money. Like, they got 40k first place, 20k was for Renegades. And in the series, Savage went ham. He went plus 33, 92 ADR. And the maps were Renegades won Train, and then Vici won Dust 2 and Cobblestone. Obviously, we don't know that much about Vici. We haven't researched a ton because they don't play much in the West. But what Renegades were a team where the storyline was supposedly that they're improving. They're getting better and better. Now, they obviously didn't make it into E-League. What do you think of Renegades losing here? What do you think of that means for them?
It doesn't help me at all, because I've like this team. I don't know what it is. They have looked better online. Granted, it is in North America, but they seem to have all this talent. Seem to have like the big thing is, for me, again, like on some of these maps, like just looking at the stats for Train, which is supposed to be, actually Renegades did win this one, but JKS and Ozzer did not have really that good of games. It was Yam and Ustillo.
Series, they have the worst stats, by the way, Ozzer and JKS.
Yeah, that just shows it right there. Like, those two players, one of them needs to go nuts. Those are like the most skilled impact players on the team. They're supposed to be the stars, and these are also guys that have like avoided criticism, I guess, because Renegades has never really done anything that crazy, but like both of these guys are ones that we've said over the years have looked to be those star players and have had those performances, and now they're just getting more and more in the past, in the distance. Like, when are these guys going to step up? What does Renegades need? They take out Sponge. The strats obviously get a little bit more simple, so the players seem a little bit free to do what they want. They have these 2 ops now. They have this really, really scary double op setup with Yam and Ricky, but nothing seems to be clicking with these guys anymore, and to get bodied in this fashion by the second best team in Asia, that's not good, especially because the entire point of moving to North America is that you get to compete with more and more better teams, like teams that are more organized, and you have your Cloud9s, you have your Optics and your Liquids that you get to play against. This should be helping them improve, and they still don't seem to be making any steps forward. So I'm not sure what their problem is, but outside of this event, they look pretty decent online. It's just, you don't feel like if Ozzer and JKS don't step up, they don't have anything that can really push them into a win in any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, for Renegades, right, back when they used to have Havoc and Sponge, I always said one of those two has to go. They both have a lot of underperformances. So they removed Havoc, got a tiny bit better. They got Ustillo. Then they removed Sponge. Oh, he stepped down, whatever. Then they got in Ricky. Okay, so the lineup, looks good. And online, they're doing pretty well, and they seem to be improving. The problem is, I have to say, this is an example where I agree with all those roster moves. I think they're all good moves. But my main issue is, if you look at when they're failing, so they're failing to get into E-League, they're failing at this LAN here in the final, I have to say, I think the choking issue of that team, or the underperforming issue of that team, goes deeper than those players, basically. I think there's something in this core. I haven't figured out who it is or what it is, but there's something still in that team where they can't play to the level of the players they have on that team, because they should be better. Now, interestingly enough, when I did my research on Renegades for that video I did where I kind of wrecked them, I think it was like either early this year. Yeah, maybe early this year. I remember when I actually was researching Azza, someone actually told me that he had a rep in the past of Counter-Strike of being like what they call a caker, which is their version of choker, basically. Now, on LAN, he didn't do particularly well. And I have to say, it's a good term, right? If you look at a lot of these, I mean, obviously, I'd say, someone like Warden's more of a caker myself, but just my own joke there. Shout out to all the old school people who know what I'm talking about. So some people get over being a caker, like Fraud eventually did. It's legit.
This is where you give the exclamation point, Thorin.
So anyway, that's not bad. Could still be talking about choking. So, I mean, ironically, those players never choked on anything in their lives. Like, it all went down nice and smooth. No Heimlich maneuvers, no fingers down the throat. Okay, that's enough. That's enough of that. Okay. So anyway, so you get the point. Is that that's what I think the problem with that team is. Now, the problem with that is it's okay when one player chokes. You can replace them, right? The big issue is this is like a lower level version of the Astralis problem, where it's like if there's some sort of a sentiment among all the players that there's something a bit off, fucking hell, like that's like the anti version, the toxic version of what they call like culture in America. Like at basketball clubs, okay, the reason you bring in like some amazing captain or some like veteran players is you're trying to gradually alter the culture of the team, and what you want is you want the veteran guys to talk to like the young up and coming star and be like, listen, big fella, like I was around some star players myself, like this is how they had to conduct themselves, and this is kind of like the responsibility you got to take, and be smarter about being at the playing on time and work out more, they'll party, that's one of the ways you change the culture. But then also you want like the veteran leader guy to be the guy who's sort of like, listen, I'll give you just an example of this in basketball. Like say we're a really good defensive team, like in our team we don't give up layups, take a foul, like we're just going to send a message, that sort of a thing. And what you're doing is you're building in a culture where everyone's got like essentially you're transferring your mindset to the whole group. Now in Astralis, they've never really gotten over like they did in a sense, because Coruscant Carrigan brought something that helped them out of the fetish problems where they never used to win tournaments, but they're still lacking something, which is what if you remember when they added Kirby's, one of the things I hoped he would bring to them, because he was being super clutch when he was in Dignitas team when they did badly, so I thought maybe he can help it. Now they haven't figured it out, and it's obvious Renegades hasn't figured it out. So right now, beyond like some sort of really good coach, I don't know what you even do in this team.
Well, they do have a coach right now, actually.
Really good coach. As I said, really good.
Yeah,
we don't know yet what type of coach he is.
When I did my research for Renegades for IEM Taipei, which was way the fuck back in January, I got in touch with some of the analysts and some of like the Counter-Strike guys over in Australia, and I asked them about some of these players, just their history and the personalities and everything, specifically with JKS and Ozzer, because those are obviously the two big names. And I don't remember which one was prescribed to which, but one of them, and I believe it was Ozzer, was the one where they said he will always lose to like top teams the first time around, or he will always lose to teams the first time around until he kind of learns how to play against them and like how he can, where he's going to be able to find his opportunities. Like he's the guy who has to take that loss in order to learn how to beat them. Okay. And then JKS is the guy who, just like every other like emerging star, has that momentum issue where if they get started really, really well in a match, then they're going to have a big match. But if they start really, really slow and get beat up early on, then they're not going to have that great of a match. And the tough part is that can't fucking happen. Like, and here's the thing: it's okay if you're an emerging star for like that first year you're starting to come up in the scene. First year you're in that competition against pros. Like that's typical of team. Like we've seen Tarek go through that. We saw Lige go through. We've seen Nitro go through it. It happens with most people, but the point is now these guys have been competing against tier 1 competition for 2-3 years. I mean, you bring up the experience issue and bring in that veteran. Everyone on this team, except for maybe Ricky, is experienced. They're supposed to be veterans at this point. They're supposed to be done with these very, very basic mental issues. So there is some kind of a deep problem in this team where they just can't seem to perform consistently. I don't know what it is, but I mean, this is a tournament they definitely, I feel, should have won. VG, I mean, obviously they beat Virtus.Pro, so there's some talent there, but I mean, you should think this Renegades team should have been able to win this tournament. I think that's a disappointing result for them, especially.
In fact, I'll go ahead. I've got the analogy for you. Right now, Renegades to me is like the phase of the Australasian region, because you look at the lineup, they have pretty much close to the best 5 you could get. Like there's the odd player elsewhere that I've seen some hype for and seen the odd good game from. Like obviously James was pretty good in Unity.
Zuzi and Winter Fox.
Yeah, he was pretty good. So, but aside from that, they look like they've assembled almost the 5 best you can get. Like if these players were on other teams, they'd all be the star player. But put them together and somehow they're actually less than that. Like they're less good than you expect the lineup to be, and for the same reason as FaZe, it's like you can't really figure out what the next step is. It seems like some sort of systemic issue.
Yeah, and it also doesn't seem to be like in a difference from FaZe as well, where FaZe just looks kind of like lost. It seems like there's at least structure to this Renegades team where they kind of have an idea of what they want to do. Maybe it does come down to just the kind of inconsistency where if you do look at this team, much like FaZe, JKS, Ozza, even Yam and Ricky, like to their own credit, have some star power to them. Maybe it really is just kind of this like lost identity or lost roles of the players where they can't figure out exactly what they're supposed to be doing in this team despite that structure. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see. To see this team underperform. It would be interesting to get like Sponge's opinion on this or something, or grab one of the guys from another Australian team and like one of the like James or something and see what he had to think about it.
So here's the interesting idea I've got, okay? And no one suggested this idea, so I'm gonna be the first, Moses.
All right.
Is in the past, when the team was like a little bit worse than now and they had Sponge and Havoc, etc. I used to actually often tell NA teams, when you're thinking about getting some new talent, at least think about JKS and Azza. Like, I don't know if they would leave, but have them on your radar, because at least like watch how they do, and then if they look good enough, potentially that's the obvious thing for me, because I think some of those guys are good, and so I'd like one day for them to be on a good team, and if that means they have to leave Renegades, so be it, okay? Well, now, if this team is going to be in NA for a long time, and they're going to stay there, and they're going to play in all these Western competitions, hell, why doesn't this team look into like, maybe we need a specialist in-game leader, or we need something like that. We've got talent, that's fine. Maybe we need, for example, okay, there are some rumors in the future of some players getting kicked from some big teams in Europe, okay? So like, let's say an in-game leader got kicked. That's exactly the scenario there. If he doesn't have the option to go to the second or third best team in his country, then what you do is you say, listen, mate, here's a really good salary. Well, you'll come in. We don't expect things overnight from you. Just change the culture. Teach these guys how you want them to play in the meta game. Figure out how to get the most out of this guy. I think that's a really interesting project, even if they can get the players up for it. So if I were the Renegades org, that's the main thing I'd be thinking of right now. You don't need more talent. You need to get the best out of your talent, Because assuming you think these players are good, presumably they do, now you need someone who can just like bring that out of them, And on their own, they're not doing it at the moment. They're not figuring it out.
The question also is, because I know 100% when the American, like when all that shuffling was going on, all the roster changes in the offseason were going on, I 100% I know teams talked to JKS and Ozzy and said like, talk to them about, leaving Renegades and joining an actual North American roster. And I'm assuming it was just, I know this team was in like negotiations with Jonas Jerebko, I'm assuming, to be part of the Detroit Renegades once they were kind of in that limbo period when Renegades was being sold by Monty. So I don't know if it's a situation where they all like just wanted to stick together. Obviously, being Australian in a foreign land, having 5 of your mates from back home is always a nice thing that you've been with for 3 years. But that's the question: are they going to bring someone in, or is it going to be too late? Is eventually someone going to say this is a sick offer from like a TSM? Maybe TSM looks at one of these guys at some point.
Yep. Also, guys, listen, I've said this many times before. Having friends is really overrated, right? And mainly in the Counter-Strike sense. I said it like that just to be stupid, but in the Counter-Strike sense, it's very overrated. Like, here's the thing, okay? First and foremost, I've always said this to people who are like, yeah, but that guy's my friend. I was like, oh, don't worry. As long as he still goes to the event, you're still allowed to talk to him outside of your games.
Right.
Now, inside the game, having friends is very overrated, right? Like, it's true that it's cool if you're in a team and you can hang out with that guy outside of games, etc. But if your team's losing, okay, that's when it's not as cool. Like, sure, you'll have a nice time together, but you want to win as well. So here's the thing, okay. Say you could bring in a player that you don't really get along with socially, but you do better in the game. Have you ever heard of a show called South Park? Because there's like 20 seasons of it. There's loads of episodes, and you can watch them all on the internet. So those 2 hours where you would have played like Yahtzee with the other guy who's not as good right now, and you would have talked about like, I don't know, football or whatever the fuck you talk about, Australian rules, rugby, I don't fucking know. In this scenario, just watch South Park. Like, it'll get you through the few next months, and you'll actually do better in turns. That's my advice to everyone. Watch South Park and get those shitters off that fucking team now. So, okay. Step one,
Fuck
step
friendship.
two. Okay. Exactly. Fuck friendship. So no, also, let's face it, if anyone who doesn't know anything about this pro scene, by the way, there's loads of players who aren't even on the same team and were mega friends, and they get to see each other at every after party and talk.
Yeah.
So it's just overrated in that sense, because people always make it one or the other, like, well, what do you want? You want total assholes in your team who you fucking hate, or you want a real nice guy who loses? Like, so those are the fucking options. Like, what kind of mad? Yeah. It's not some sort of mad like fucking logic problem or something.
There is middle ground.
You could also just have people who you aren't the best friend with, but like you're like, oh, what do you like? Oasis. What music do you like? I prefer Dr. Dre. Oh, okay, cool. But we don't hate each other. Well, no, just different music. Oh, okay, cool. Well, you listen to Dr. Dre. I'll put in my headphones, listen to Oasis. Like, it's not like you're literally just like, what do you like? I like everything you hate, man. I worship the devil himself. Like, well, I'm a good Christian boy. I can't abide by that. Hail Satan! Hail him! Like, it's not some absolutely nuts like dichotomy like that, is it? Like, can we just not? But do we have to boil everything on the internet down to the most mad extremes?
Yeah. There's 100% extremes. 100%. Speaking of which, Oasis fucking sucks.
They definitely don't. But okay. Henry G would be the one who'd wreck you for that. I don't even need to wreck him. Oasis is a shit. Again, you liked Angels and called yourself Dark Angel. Just everyone who's listening to his opinion there.
Hey, dude,
realize that.
Angels kick ass.
I realise your favourite band, Hoobastank. That is the most tilt-worthy example I just gave you there, right?
I know. I can't come back from that.
You're spinning out of control. Out of control. Yeah, that's you, Moses.
Listen, frag movies used to have better soundtracks. That's all I'm going to say.
So, okay, here's some more news. So, it was announced that TyLoo have gotten, like, Schengen visas for a year, so they can come to Europe anytime.
Sick.
Well, I don't want to go into a rant here, but the countries in Europe that are in the Schengen area, so got me into trouble once time commenting on that whole issue there, most believe it or not. So, they can come into that area of Europe, which is definitely Europe, and... they're also said that they're applying for a US visa, which hopefully would be similar. It would be like 2 years they could come into the US. And so as a result, they've essentially announced that they're going to boot camp. Like they said that they're going to boot camp in Stockholm on October 20th. And then they're going to go, believe it or not, to Acer Predator Masters 3 to be casted by Raheem and not Richard Lewis. Memes, just stacking up the beams there.
That's so good.
I know. You don't even need to say anything more about that part, right? I'll just leave that part there. So they will literally be going to Henry G's Idea of Hell, the 3rd edition of Acer Predator Masters, to listen to an unfunny man attempt to be funny on cue and fail. And
they should just rename that tournament. They should just rename that tournament Henry G's Idea of Hell Part 3.
I think that'd be a sick name.
That would be.
Anyway, what do you think about the notion that, first of all, we might see them at more Western tournaments, and also they'll actually boot camp in Sweden?
Yeah. I like it. I mean, obviously that's the next step, right? I mean, there's only so long this team can just sit in Asia and go to an event here and there if they want to actually make this work, and they've shown enough potential to make this worthwhile. The big thing is when teams do this from the level that from where TyLoo's at in the grand standing of teams in the world, I think they're going to get to this boot camp and realize that they are deficient in areas which they will need to make that step into tier 1. This is when you will see them come back from this boot camp and likely change a player. You know, this is where you realize that, yeah, we can practice all we want, and we have all these good things, and we can cause upsets, but if we ever want to consistently be competing in the top 10, I think they're going to notice that a player here or there is lacking the ability, is lacking either the willpower to learn, or maybe decides they don't want to live the lifestyle, maybe they're just not good enough. But I think TyLoo, after this boot camp, and sometime in the next 3-4 months, I think they're going to make a change in that roster. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just once they get out of their region, this region lock they've been in, this kind of the prison of that region, they're going to realize that they need to make a change. There is something lacking on some of these players. So TyLoo, it'll be interesting to see how they do after this boot camp in the next couple of events, because one of the big things they also have going for them right now is that no one has really scouted them. Well, when you go to boot camp and you're going to scrim against all these European teams, they no longer have to scout you. They no longer have to research you because they're going to be playing against you frequently. They're going to start to get the hang of that. So you're going to be in this weird, difficult limbo of where you have to change this play style while at the same time you're adjusting to a higher level of competition. So I think it's a necessary growing process, but I think we're going to see some changes out of TyLoo certainly pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. For someone who doesn't know this, in CS history, this was actually one of the key things that was done by teams famously from Brazil and Korea to help them improve. What they did was, when there would be like a big tournament coming up, or 2 or 3 big tournaments, they would come to Sweden and they would go to Inferno Online. They'd book out a week in like one of the rooms, and they would just practice there against European competition. They would play, and the idea was back home they didn't have that level of competition whatsoever. So it was a way to, if you had a good enough team already, that's the key detail, to get yourself up to speed for the event. Essentially, it's like you're getting 2 weeks of practice like anyone is. It's just that you don't have the whole year of practice. Now, in a world in the modern day where you already don't get a lot of practice because you're not at home that much, I actually think this can be very good for a team like TyLoo. They're exactly the sort of candidate where this can give them a chance to like get kind of like not perfect practice, but like better practice than they got now, and so we can give them a real chance. But I will say that a big issue that they're going to run into is what you're saying here, which is that as the other teams become more familiar with them, basically they have 2 options. 1, they will have worse results at tournaments, or 2, it forces them to improve. Now, the reason I say it is because they can't just go here, keep what they have now, get the practice, and have better results. That will not happen. And the reason why I say that is because, for example, okay, this might hurt people's feelings, hopefully it does, but if a team like Optic, for example, came and did a week's boot camp, I think they would have less chance of doing these upsets that they did at ESL One New York. It actually plays to their favor that a team like G2 probably has no idea what to expect when they play an Optic, right? As a result, they're not going to have scouted them to the nth degree. For example, at this tournament, you didn't know you'd be playing them necessarily, and so you're not really prepared for them in that sense. Whereas if you had played Optic 10 times and then you play an official, it's going to be a lot harder. Like, even down to player aspects, you're going to pick up on player tendencies. You're going to know where does Tarek go in this scenario. So I know in a 1v1, someone like Shox now has a way higher chance of winning this 1v1, So these little details, it's good because in theory, it forces you also to then have to get better to beat these teams, which is going to make you a better fundamentally good Counter-Strike team. But it also means that whole like fluke short-term thing's not going to work out as well. So overall, I think it's a net positive. And actually, I hope that other teams will do this. I'm amazed by how few NA teams have done it. Like, done a real boot camp. I mean, I know they used to do it before the DreamHack Winter Major, etc. But I think more of them should try it. Like, teams like Optic, if you can, I realize with Pro League it's going to be hard. Yeah. They should try and get the odd boot camp in here and there in Europe. Because then that whole excuse of, like, not having Europeans to compete against goes away a little bit. You get something between the 2 positions, And it would definitely, teams like Optic and like, I mean, let me think, who else would I pick out for that? Optic, TSM, that would be another obvious one. These teams that aren't like on the good, they aren't like the Liquids and Cloud9s who probably don't need it. These teams who are like they're one step away from being at that level. They're the ones who I think need to do it to get some catch up. And also, like you're saying here, by the way, here's a great function of it. This happens in League of Legends. Sometimes before Worlds, the teams go and do a Korean boot camp, even if the tournament isn't in Korea, because what they're doing is you go to where the best practice is, right? Yep. Well, it's famous that these boot camps often decide who is going to get kicked out of the team next year, because what you're doing is in the best possible practice environment with a whole week or 2 to practice, you're going to very quickly figure out which one of those players was just doing well enough in NA that you thought you could keep this guy, and you're going to realize, oh, this guy cannot stay. Like, he's actually a liability and he's just not good enough, because the idea is, instead of in NA playing 5 scrims and 3 of them are against teams you should beat anyway, and so you survive. If you play 5 scrims and they're against 5 teams who can all beat you, you're going to quickly figure out which one of those guys can't be in your team if you want to be good enough,
Well, and even look at the best example, I think, for TyLoo, and maybe not, this has nothing to do with like a boot camp necessarily, but if they want to take that next step, they have to just get their ass kicked. I look at the team that's the best for it is SK when they were Luminosity. I mean, they were that upset team for a long time. They could never win best of 3s. They could never really challenge the tier 1 teams. And what made them this world beating team that we all praise them for having a phenomenal in-game leader and a deep roster and fantastic role players in every single position is the roster changes that they had to go through, because they realized San Jose last year, they said, this roster just can't win internationally. It can't be the best in the world, and we've got to make that hard decision. So I think, to put yourself in a situation where you learn that about your team is actually very, very good. It's better that you do it earlier than later. Like, this team, I'm sure, has put a lot of hours in, but this boot camp, I think, more than anything, because even Luminosity didn't get to that point, didn't get to that realization until they had played so many tournaments with these guys. You need to have that experience to eventually just say, yeah, we've tried everything. We've tweaked some strategies, we've tweaked some roles, we've done this, and this, and none of it's really propelled us to that next level we want to be at. So the only option from here is roster change. So TyLoo's going to go to this boot camp. They're going to change some tactics. They're going to change some styles of play, and they're going to realize eventually that no matter what they change, they can't get into that top 10, even if they wanted to, even if they bust their ass and do whatever they can. So eventually, it is going to be some kind of a roster change, I think, for this team.
And obviously, the ideal thing for them is, I mean, Vici already is only just a level below TyLoo, and themselves can get upset. So I already feel like, if you get the right players from Vici, I don't know who they'd be yet because I haven't watched them in depth enough. There's probably already the talent there to get if you knew what the problem was with TyLoo and you could add in the right talent. I already think this could be a really good team. So I think it's probably just them figuring that out, for themselves. Because I don't want to say who it is. Like, I can't just say pick up Savage tomorrow because maybe they don't want like a primary AWP who plays his style. Maybe that's the system. So whoever it is, I know for sure there's talent out there in the Chinese scene, and so I just hope the process takes care of that, and picks up these guys.
Absolutely.
Okay, so some news that happened not that long ago. It was actually at the end of last month, is that E-League will be running the next major. And the next major, like the qualifier, is the 15th to 18th of December. And it's going to be in Atlanta, where we've been for the studio, for E-League, etc. And then the major itself is 7 days from the 22nd of January to the 29th. And I think it's the playoffs held in actually the same venue that we had the finals in for E-League, which is some sort of theater in Atlanta. Which
it's a different one. It's not the same exact one.
Oh, it's a different one, right? Well, anyway, this theater seats like 5,000 people, and it's apparently the one that like TI2 was in or something along those lines, I was told. So first things first, what do you think of E-League getting the major?
Oh, I'm psyched. I think it's great. I think the big thing is, I mean, E-League so quickly raised the bar, for what could be content for tournaments and leagues and everything like that. And I think it's really, really interesting. I mean, you and I both know the creative team at E-League is they've wanted this major, and they've had so much fun getting into video games and in esports and everything. So I think that they're all going to be just busting their ass to create some really, really cool things. I know they have a lot of ideas. I just spoke with Craig Berry in New York last week, and he was super excited, as excited as Craig Berry ever gets. And he's the VP of content at Turner Sports. So I think this is just the culmination of this hard work that they've done over the year, with the goal of getting a major. I mean, even we heard the rumor that Turner was supposed to have the third major last year. So I mean, it just kind of makes sense they have this first one. But I have full confidence that they're going to bust out some very, very cool, some very new things that I don't think we've seen before at esports events, certainly in Counter-Strike.
And then also you got to add in that the interesting thing about this move is it's obviously a brand new org hosting a major. In the past, the majors were all shared between DreamHack and ESL. And then MLG got one, which was obviously the first of last year. And now we have a fourth totally different company who's getting a major as well. So I think that's certainly interesting in itself to see, because not only are they getting the major, but this asks the question, for example, going forwards, who doesn't get majors? That's what I want to know as well. And we don't know yet, but I want to know, for example, okay, ESL's still huge, cool. MLG, certainly an amazing major, so maybe they're in the running, but at the end of the day, there can't be, I don't think everyone can have them anymore. I think someone's going to get kicked out. And so unfortunately, this is another area where I feel like DreamHack might get dropped down a bit, because they're already the ones on the outs of leagues,
Yeah, well, that's also a little bit of a bummer, I think, because the last, so if you forget about DreamHack Opens, because those are obviously not their cream of the crop tournaments, that's not where they want to make their money. Those DreamHack Masters, those are the ones where that's their example of what they can do when they harness all their resources and create the most badass possible event. I thought Malmo was one of the best events of the year. In a lot of different ways, right. And I know it was a little bit unfortunate. I think they had to cancel their second Masters event just because of the scheduling this year. But I think pretty sure they're having one next year. So I mean, I ran to get the details about that, but I think their Masters events have. I mean, so far we've only had one. That was sick. I've also heard that StarLadder is the next big organization that has been pitching for majors. Have been just trying to increase everything they possibly can on all levels. Just pump effort into those events to try and get a major as well. So yeah, I think eventually, especially, I don't know if this is going to happen. I would have to doubt it because of how early the first major is this year or next year. I doubt that there's only going to be 2 majors next year. But yeah, someone is certainly going to be left out in the cold. I think the good news is that, maybe not good news, but the good news for other organizers is that since MLG is bought by Activision Blizzard, I don't know how realistically how much they're actually going to have a chance of getting another major. I just don't see Valve saying, yeah, let's do it. Rival studios, rival developers. So I think that takes them out of the running. But certainly DreamHack, ESL, E-League, StarLadder, and I imagine PGL would put a pitch in as well, I guess.
Depends what happens with the PEA situation, I guess, on that one.
Yes.
No, I agree.
On P.
Like, my big problem is when I listed off those 4 names, I can't actually say that any of them should be kicked out. Like I think all of them have their own compelling reasons to host a major. It's just that there can't be 4 majors a year. There might not even be 3, so we don't know. So unfortunately, someone probably does have to miss out no matter what. And at the moment, I have to say, at the moment, the only one that seems assured is ESL, because ESL One Cologne in general is very highly regarded within the industry. So I feel like that one is fairly obvious that they'll keep doing it. So I feel like ESL's the only guy locked in with them. I think for everyone else, it's still up in the air. Like,
it's hard to see. It's hard to see a year in which ESL does not have a major, whether that's Cologne or a different event. I don't know. Obviously, like an event like we talked about it. That venue that New York was in felt like it was like a major venue. Like that was a sick venue to be in the Barclays Center. I thought that stage was. Personally, I thought the stage at the Barclays Center looked cooler than the Cologne stage, in my opinion. I thought they did that very well. Obviously, they couldn't be a major if they're going to have Street Fighter and all these different games there. But it is hard to imagine a year in which ESL doesn't have one of the majors. So I mean, let's just say there's 2 majors up for grab a year, potentially only 1 among 3 other organizers. And I think what that's going to do is just, I mean, it's kind of cool because it's going to raise the bar just by competition. Everyone's going to try and one up each other. Everyone's going to try and have the coolest product to be able to pitch to Valve and say, this is what we can do. Look at this event we just ran. Look how badass this was. Let's make this a major, or let us host a major much like this in this location. So I think it's going to actually do great for some of the bigger events in terms of raising the bar, in terms of player treatment, in terms of talent treatment, in terms of production value, in terms of format and competition. I think it'll be great all around.
Yep. Okay. So let's just see. Where was this piece of detail? Okay, right. Okay, here's a small piece of info that I just want to get a quick take on. So Garrett, GRT, was kicked out as the coach from CLG. Now, obviously, CLG actually only had their new roster fairly recently. They went to, let me think, they went to Northern Arena. Did they have the full lineup there?
Yes.
Okay, they had Northern Arena where they didn't do very well. And then, obviously, they failed to get a E-League. That goes without saying. So he only had apparently around like 2 months to be the coach. And also, the way he was kicked was fairly rare in esports. Like, I agree with it. I think it's good. Like,
I loved it.
If it's truly the case, I'd like to know this, because I'd like to know when someone did a bad job or whatever, and you really kicked him for that reason. But they went out of their way in this statement to basically make it clear that, like, they didn't think he did a good enough job. They even said this comment here. They put, CLG is committed to becoming the best possible team. We will do whatever is necessary to achieve that goal. So that the implication there is that means kicking him out. Like, he was holding them back from that. What do you think about this in general? Because obviously the problem with Garrett is he's someone where I know, like, he has some background in, like, hockey or something. Like, I think he played a lot of that, but as far as I know, he's just been brought in because there's that spate of, like, I was a 1.6 pro, therefore make me the coach of your team, which people are using as a logic now, whereas he wasn't, like, known even as an in-game leader. Like, at least GB James, I'll give him credit, he at least had the rep of, like, in-game leader, raises up young talents. Okay, that was a rep that he had. But I have to say the Garrett one, for me, I can't say that they're wrong, because first of all, I don't know anything about it. He wasn't they weren't a good team. And then thirdly, because he was starting at 0 for me, he had to show me something to show he was really good. So at the moment, it's hard to see this as one I can even say anything negative about. What do you think about this move?
Well, first I want to say I love that. I loved that press release. Just how upfront it was, and I know it's harsh to Garrett, obviously, but like the big question for CLG and even like TSM, like even all the League of Legends organizations, even Cloud9 had this at one point, where they just like had a Counter-Strike team because it was the big game, and none of them actually fucking cared to be good. I think that press release is like the step in the right direction for CLG, where I think a lot of the CS community is just like, this org doesn't give a fuck about their CS team. They are just willing to let it flounder. They are just willing to let it be decent, such and such and such. So I thought that was a really cool change, and I think that's the next step in esports in general, is stop having this situation where we're so buddy-buddy. Like, say you want to have the results, and then you weren't getting there, and this is why he's gone. I'm fine with that, regardless of how harsh it was to Garrett. In terms of Garrett himself, I played against him at the end of my 1.6. That would have been like 2005, right before CGS.
And then he was in GB.
Yeah, and then he was, and then he played in CGS with 2 teams. I think it was Chicago Chimera and Optics, San Francisco Optics, where he was. I mean, from what he tells me, he was a good player in CGS. I don't really follow CGS because I don't really give a fuck. But I think the tough part is especially when you bring a former 1.6 pro who, like you said, was not an in-game leader in 1.6, and they have no competitive CS:GO experience. If you like, it's hard to learn this game on a level to be able to improve a team. If you haven't competed in it, like there are nuances to how things are. Like you can't just watch a demo and get the feel for how scenarios play out, how you have to attack a bomb site.
Let me give you an example. Okay, I'll give you a quick example. It's fresh in my mind. I talked to someone who was not just a good 1.6 player. This guy is a legendary leader. Like I'm talking like a god of 1.6 in-game leading.
Come on now.
So.
Who is it?
No, I can't give you the real detail because it's a private conversation. It wasn't like an interview or something. So the key thing is, this is one of those guys who was like innovating the metagame. He wasn't just setting it, okay?
Yeah.
And when I talked to him, he just started watching CSGO. He'd watched the odd tournament, okay? And because some of the maps are the same, like Inferno and Dust 2 are similarly laid out, he was telling me a criticism of a team that had just lost a game, right? And he was telling me, like, oh, the way they play this map on CT side, like, they don't understand the map at all. Like, you know, they're playing, like, way too passive on this area of the map. And, like, you know, what they should do is push up, control that area of the map. And if the enemy comes, you flash them off. And then, like, you either hold it in stalemate or you make them rush into you. And what I literally had to tell him was, listen, mate, you're absolutely right if this was 1.6. That is the metagame of how you play that part of the map. And anyone who doesn't do that is like a lesser team who don't understand tactics. But the specific map, again, I won't give that detail away because this person hasn't spoken publicly. I don't want to like shame them, you know?
Yeah.
But the problem was, the specific area of the map he was talking about was one where, believe it or not, the team he was criticizing had actually innovated that part of the metagame on that map, and everyone else copied them because they at the moment were at the height of the metagame. And in fact, the style he was describing would get you destroyed in CSGO. Like in CSGO with mollies and flashes
and
smokes,
underhand flashes,
you would never be able to hold this area in the way that he was talking about, because essentially it just looked the same. Like the wall is in the same place. The map and the game is so different that like this guy, if he was coaching a team, would destroy the team. Now listen, he's a smart guy. I'm sure if he actually was, you know, not just watching for fun, he would learn this, okay? He'd learn the metagame and he would, you know, just as he did in all the other games. The problem is, like we're saying here, when you bring this guy in, if they haven't got competitive CSGO experience, they haven't been an in-game leader, they're learning 2 things. They're learning how to be an in-game leader and they're learning the fucking game. So unless you're like a 6-month project, a year project, I don't know that you can have that guy do something in 2 months, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. The big thing is maybe it was a bit quick on the trigger in terms of just the 2 months to be a coach. Maybe it had something to do with personality clashes with the team. Maybe the players. I mean, the pickup itself happened very quickly of Garrett. I mean, that was a very short interview process. So it's like I almost feel like maybe the players didn't exactly know what he was going to bring to the team. Garrett asked me to do an interview with him as soon as he started doing coaches. He wanted me to interview him and ask questions and get some of his thoughts out there, especially because they picked up Ethan and Sub Rosa. Never actually happened. But you know,
well, is it because he said like, let's play the scenario? Okay, so let's like imagine you're Garrett and you just come to me and you just say like a rough thing, like say like, oh, okay, like, here we go, Skype message,
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, what's up, Garrett?
Hey Moses, you're such a good analyst. I was wondering if I could do it.
Wait a minute, let me just turn off the Hooper stank. Okay, I've got it off. Okay, so what were you saying? Yeah.
I want to do an interview with you. I just
Team Liquid's going to win. Oh, sorry. What were you saying? Yeah, keep going. What did you ask me for? Yeah. Okay.
To rip your shirt open, Duncan. You have to rip your shirt open.
Yeah. So,
So I picked up these guys, Sabrosa and Ethan. I want to get my thoughts out there as to why we picked up these new young talents.
Yeah. But why would I do an interview with you though?
I don't fucking know actually.
Yeah,
that's
where it breaks down, right? That's where it breaks down, right?
But no, actually, I tried to do it because it would have been cool. Because the one thing we don't actually get a lot of interviews and content about are the coaches and like what they actually do and their thought process behind the thing and like what they're providing to teams. And I thought that would be a really cool angle. It just so happened that he was they'd lose a batch and they'd all be pissed, so he would like go back and watch the VODs or demos with the teams, and we just never found time to do it. But I had all these questions laid out about things I would ask him, and one of like the big ones I wanted to get at was what do you bring to the team as like former 1.6 and Source player who has never competed in Go at any kind of a high level. Like you were the coach of Splice, who by the way was known to be like tactically brain dead, and all you guys did was shout and get hyped. Like what? Like you're obviously not an X's and O's coach. So what are you bringing into the equation here as a coach? How are you going to improve this team? Things like that. What do you see in Subroza? So I think maybe this is him departing this team had to have been like some kind of personality clash with the players. I don't know what he would have what he was bringing to the team at all. That would be cool to talk to the players and see. But the big thing is maybe a part of it is you look at Subroza and Ethan as pickups. They've been a little bit lackluster, very lackluster in Subroza's case. They've had a lot of accusations and bad publicity for the CLG team of people just saying, why are they picking up a cheater? Who knows? I don't know if he actually does. I don't know. I don't necessarily believe he does. But as an organization, you're like, why are we getting all this bad publicity for a pickup? And the coach is like, well, yeah, he was accused of cheating, but, I thought we'd bring him in. Maybe they were pissed about that.
So, okay, here's the thing. First and foremost, I agree on the Splice thing. The key thing about Splice for me is that is the most insane bullshit upset in the history of CSGO. The fact that they made that major, right? Because,
yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
They were in the group with Dignitas and CLG, for fuck's sake, who were both pretty decent teams at the time. So the maddest part about that whole qualification for me is that, put it this way, none of their players since have been picked up to go to better teams. That says something. Even the people who play them day in and day out are like, no, they're definitely not that good. Now, I think a couple of their players are all right, okay. Maybe a couple could one day be on another team, but that team in general, that was an insane bullshit upset. To the extent, I always give the analogy, okay, here's the analogy, Moses. So this term bird strike, which is where if you're flying a small aeroplane that only has 2 engines, if a flock of birds flies towards the plane and one of them goes in the engine will explode, and because you only have 2 engines, your plane will crash, okay? And you will die, right? So I don't know why I said that part really so oh my god, do the kids know what happens when plane? Mummy, what happens when plane crashes? Oh, Grandma Amelia Earhart is with God now. I don't know. Okay, you die when planes crash, believe it or not. So in case anyone hasn't seen the beginning of Dark Knight Rises. So you die when planes crash, okay? So, but here's the principle, okay? So the reason why that term is really well known to me is because in poker, there's a term called donk strike. Because since a donk is like a donkey, like a shit player, if you go into the World Championship, okay, there's so many donks that the idea is, because in poker, if you're all in, the best you can be is something like a 8-1 favorite or something, right? So even then, there's a not ridiculously low chance you can just get upset by any 2 cards. So if you get all in enough in a big tournament and there's enough morons, inevitably some morons will make it deep in the tournament, and indeed some morons will knock out good players because enough of them will knock them out. So to me, Splice was just a case of a random team who came along and somehow they were the little bird that flew into the Dignitas engine, okay? Now with that said, you don't, like an idiot fan on Reddit would, say, right, well, you know what we need? The Germans have got brand new planes in this world war. We're going to train up these fucking birds. No, the point there is that it just takes enough random birds that it'll happen one day eventually.
There's still fucking retarded birds flying into an engine.
A bird is not a very good device for either aiming at an engine. It's not like a fucking missile that seeks out engines, is it? Nor is it actually that great for taking out engines. Like an actual missile is better for taking out engines. A bird has to fly in a very particular fashion. So my point is, Splice are useless, just like a bird would be as a directed homing missile to take out engines. So yeah, Splice is not, if that interview was what did you do in your career then? That was good. Well, I got Splice to the major. Yeah, did you though? Or was that just God, chaos, inertia, I don't know, entropy? Entropy,
chaos theory.
Not inertia. Yeah. Was that just entropy in the universe? Things getting worse, breaking down over time. So, yeah, Splice is nothing. Also, when he said that thing about how he would have done the interview, but every time CLG lost a game, he had to review the VODs, so he never got back to you. That's he's like, yeah, listen, something's come up, Mose. I'll do the interview as soon as CLG stops losing and I have to watch the VODs. And then there's just a gif of Moses as a skeleton, I will wait patiently for Garrett's return. Just losing every fucking game. Please, Garrett, please respond, please. I don't think you were ever going to get that interview, to be fair. Okay.
No, probably not. It was his idea, though. I thought it might have been likely. He was the one who approached me. Okay. I didn't go to him, so... no, it was no big deal. Whatever.
So this is a quick one, but what do you think of the sound updates where they changed the sound of the main guns now? Now, instead of just having the P250 sound like someone flicking a fucking rubber band against the back of your neck in class. Now, even the AK, the Galil, the FAMAS, the fucking M4A, M4A1S, they've all changed sound. The AWP has changed sound. What do you think of these sound changes? Give me your thoughts on a couple.
Well, the pistols are all shit.
Those are trash, yeah.
Yeah, we'll set those aside. We'll put them in the shit category. I don't mind the M4 one. I think the AK one just sounds a little weak. I love the new op. I think the new op is sick. I just want to know why. Like, what? Can we just get a why? Can we get an explanation of the thought process of like why these sounds needed updating? That's all I want to know. Maybe it would be good. It would at least probably be a funny read. I just don't see what was so necessary about sounds needing to be changed.
That's genius, though. It's like the idea that like Valve comes to Thorin. They're like, yeah, Thorin. Good news. In the next update, we changed the M4A1S. Oh shit, cool. Right, it has like 30 clip now. Maybe you can like remove the sound. Well, no, just change the sound. Wait a minute, though. The sound. You mean like the actual sound file? Yeah, it just sounds like a different weapon now, like a real M4A1S. But I don't know what that sounds like. But it sounds like this. Goodbye, Valve. Like, fuck, what even is that? I would just hang up at that point now. Listen, I can't be taking these calls anymore. I've got Garrett on the other line. I've got to go talk to him now. Garrett, yeah, about that splice thing, mate. You are fucking, I think you know a thing or two. Let's do an interview, mate.
Here's the thing. People seem to be like trying to rationalize so much why the sounds are changed that people are like, oh yeah, they're changing it because now that it's on TV, the sounds need changed. And I don't even understand that one. I don't even understand the logic behind that. Why does it need to be changed for TV? Like, do they not sound okay on television? I just, that's the thing. I mean, even
Moses, I think you answered your own question there, mate. Yeah. So obviously CSGO is getting bigger. It's now on American TV, and we know that every American has an actual AK-47 in his back pocket while walking around because like God or something allowed you to do that. And then so as a result, they really do watch CS and they're like, I can't get into this game because that is a totally unrealistic P250 sound. Like, doesn't sound. Look, kids. See, that's what a real T250
that would make sense
like.
If everyone in America was using like a potato gun and they wanted all the pistols to sound like fucking potato guns. Like that, even the kids, that would be logical. Even
the kids are like, listen, Dad, like I know that you think this game's cool, but like when our uncle shot our aunt with that fucking USP-S, like it sounded way different than that. Like so.
It's just like the sounds are just like so whatever. I mean, I don't think it's like unplayable. Obviously, it's just kind of I don't understand why. I don't think it's a huge deal.
It did make me think of one joke though, because one thing I don't get, I find it really weird actually, is why they made the AWP have that weird thunder sound.
I love it. I love it.
But then I figured it out. You know where I figured out, Moses? That the reason they did the AWP like that, right, is because Smith's is a primary AWPer. And you know that old saying, like, thunder never strikes twice? That's pretty good, right? It's actually not bad, is it?
You know, Smiths is sitting somewhere listening to this, and he's just like,
really, again,
why does he keep rigging me up?
It's like, what?
Nothing to do with G2.
If you're people like Smiths or Devil, it's like you just don't get it, because again, it has nothing. It's like you don't understand. I have a little grab bag at all times, and if I ever need, it's like improv. I just go in that grab bag. Oh, something about Smiths being shit. Yeah. Oh, Devil, you're a bot. Like fucking hell. What I'm talking about. Like, I can always go to that, mate. That's so well I can keep going to. I will say this, Moses. Now you can think about this whatever you want, but I can identify my own thought process and when they're a bit wacky. But you know, just like I've said this on a past episode, you know when you switch your sensitivity a bit higher and then suddenly you're hitting like a slightly more like flick shots and you think, oh yeah, I've fixed it now, I'm going to be way sicker at CS. But obviously it levels off and you realise, no, you're just better in one area. It's like, in the same sense, I will say, I do feel like for some bizarre reason, I think that the M4A4 sound in a weird way has reprogrammed my brain, and I feel like I'm better at bursting with the gun now and I get more kills. Now, I will say that makes no sense whatsoever. No. It's definitely not true, but I feel like it's true. I feel like it's true.
I just played CS for like the first time since like Cologne, like just yesterday, and I thought the same thing. I was like, why am I so good at the M4 now? Like the M4.
Here's the thing. I used to always use M4A1S because I always found the M4A4, like, I didn't find the spray was that great, actually. It was all right, but I preferred to just burst with the S. But I actually prefer the M4A4 now. I think for some reason I can use it better. I don't know why.
I mean, it'll always remain an unanswered question.
Obviously,
like why the fuck we need sound updates in the first place?
Moses, again, I'm going back to that well again. Obviously, what they need to do is just change the AWP sound again until Smiths gets really good with the AWP. I'm back there again. There we go. Maybe Smiths and Devil, instead of spending time practicing, should just try and become the sound designer for Valve and find a sound that would make their brain able to hit shots more. Okay, we're going to end the Devil and Smith segment of the show.
We've got a bit far on that one.
Okay, so anyway, skip that. Right, we've done that part. So let's have a look. Let's see what else there was. Okay, have you watched the new HellRaisers play at all?
No.
Okay, because they've signed that guy Dead Fox, apparently like legit for good. They've signed him to that team. The problem I have with that team is that's the team, if you remember, that's Angel, Bondix, the Ukrainians. Then they have Sticko and Zero, who are from... Just have a look.
I gotta tell you, Bondix has got to be one of the most depressing stories ever.
Oh, it's terrible.
Like leaves Flipside as like their star player to go to HellRaisers, and then HellRaisers doesn't qualify for the major, and Flipside gets top 8.
And then Oscar leaves.
Yeah. And that's just like that happened like the month after he got there was Oscar getting benched. So it's like, fuck. Yeah, he's got to be depressed.
Because my problem with HellRaisers is I don't see that that's a team that's going anywhere, quite frankly.
The question I have is why the hell is Angel signing a contract to the end of... I guess it's not that bad. It's about a year.
Because in theory, if you look at it, he seems to be the person who either in some sense like owns part of it or like has some super in with the best people in the team or whatever. I mean, here's the thing. HellRaisers was never that sick anyway. Like, they were in, like, 2014, they were pretty good, but at the end of 2014, it was basically only having Simple in the team that kept them, like, relevant, you know. They had upset potential then. As soon as Simple left, they became what basically, like, a Gambit is now. Just an all-right team that can maybe upset you on one map, but is never going to go deep in the tournament. In fact, at that point in time, I remember my joke always used to be that, like, the best thing about the HellRaisers organization is fucking Vladislava. I love seeing her at every event.
Yeah, that's great.
Call me.
It always brings a smile on my face.
Exactly.
Have you seen this fucking picture that HellRaisers put in this contract announcement? It's like a HellRaiser. It's like an actual devil handing over a contract. It's like some mad Faustian.
That is unreal.
Let me have a look. Your soul.
I'm gonna look. I'll look it up now.
It's unreal.
No, I can't look there, but I'll have a look. Let me have a look. This is the one about Kuchi, yeah? Angel, you mean?
Yeah, Angel and Dead Fox. It's like, here's where you sign your soul away to be for the period of 1 year.
It actually is a devil in a red suit, and he's handing them a contract. Like, oh god, that's too good, isn't it? That is unreal. Why are you doing that?
It's so good. So good.
I mean, here's the thing: they've done a sick job of keeping consistent with like the imagery and the theme is on point. It's just that is the maddest concept I can actually imagine. Like,
it's even better because it's from like the CIS region, so it's just like fuck. What is this contract actually asking of you?
Like, what else are they gonna do? I have a picture where like fucking Dead Fox is like slashing his arm up with a razor and signing it in blood or something. Like, unreal, isn't it?
Could at least do like some like sexy Halloween girls like wearing devil costumes or some shit holding a contract. They did make that like maybe it wasn't HellRaisers, was it? Who made that like mad video? No, that was Gambit, who does the mad videos with Doja.
Yeah. See, that's one of the things I love about Eastern Europe, actually, Moses. Same in Asia. They haven't got like masses of third wave feminists ruining the whole world. So they're still actually to the other extreme. They're still on that mad tip where it's like, you want some games or a car? Well, yeah, I love those things. How about some tits as well? Well, if you're offering. And so I love it, man. I think it's sick. Like, I love the way in those countries they just go straight like, here's the presenter. Wonder what gender she is. Woman every time. Brilliant. Guess what? I prefer looking at women who are just talking bollocks rather than a man talking bollocks.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at the counterpoints guy. The war is over.
Exactly. Counterpoints is our fucking show. You just dissed us unintentionally.
Shit, my bad. Listen.
I agree, though. I'd rather look at a woman. Right? I'd rather Vladislava was in this other box. Like, hey, Vladdy, what do you think about this news? Rather than you. So you have got that correct.
Listen, if a girl was on that stage going, the war is over, brah, 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 that'd be epic. It would have been a legendary sequence.
Then again, though, if I'm being honest, my ideal Skype call with Vladislava is not actually a 3-hour talk show about, like, what's happening in CSGO. So we'll see. Maybe that'll happen for me, boys. I won't be telling you on this show, obviously, because I keep.
We're going pretty deep down the rabbit hole on this one. We're in dangerous waters here, Duncan.
I'm trying to go pretty deep down the rabbit hole. Anyway, Playboy reference. Okay, so. Right, let's go to the next piece of news. Next piece of news is that an event called ESL One New York happened. And here's the thing. For an event that isn't a major, it actually was very stacked, and it was a very good tournament. Like, obviously only 8 teams, so every time you have 8 teams, as you saw with Pro League, it'll never be as sick as a major because they have all the best teams there, but still a very nice lineup. Now, let's start at the top and work our way back. So Na'Vi won the whole event and only lost 2 maps. They lost to Team Liquid on Cobblestone, and then they lost to Virtus.Pro on Cobblestone. Aside from that, they beat Team Liquid, Virtus.Pro in the group stage, and they beat SK in the group stage. What do you think of Na'Vi winning this tournament?
I thought it was pretty impressive. I thought it was pretty unlikely, seeing as how, well, I mean, this was kind of the theme of every team going into that event. Everyone outside of like Virtus.Pro, I feel like was underperforming coming into the, maybe G2 as well. So that was the big question. But Na'Vi especially, because I know going into this event, I'd heard a lot of rumors that after New York that they were going to make a roster change to the roster that just won the whole event. So that's pretty crazy. Obviously, it preserves that lineup. But I thought they looked so sick because they still played that like. I mean, it wasn't like super tactical and strategic as we've seen in the past. It was a little bit more loose, but that Simple as like the X factor of that team. And he did it a couple times where it was just like they now have a couple players who can just win you a single map. So when they're grinding out these matches, Simple against Liquid on that third map, he was just like, all right, this is over now. I'm done with it. And then Guardian in the third map of the finals. But I think that team has so much skill, and then they have these X factors of being able to just carry a game. I thought that was a very good performance out of them. Simple actually playing within like that Na'Vi system as well. I thought that was really cool to see. It wasn't like Simple trying to do his own shit. The only time he really seemed to break free of any constraints tactically that they had was when he was obviously on fire, and they were just like, "Yep, Simple, go do whatever you want." So I thought they looked great, to be honest.
So, okay, this is going to already rile people up, okay? Because people, remember, obviously, one of the things that makes fanboys super mad is that Ivo was obviously one of the earliest to, like, be going pretty hard at, like, the Simple one day, if he gets his shit together, will be, like, an unreal player, you know? So, and he was another player, famously, by the way, where they used the whole Nico argument, like, oh, he only looks good in Flipside because the rest of the team is not good and he forces them to play his style, you know, all that sort of shit. So, obviously, everyone who said that, like, they're dead already. Like, they can never speak again, or they've had to pretend like they never thought that. So that's already over. But now people acknowledge, okay, he's a very good player. He's obviously the MVP of this tournament. I actually think if you look at the way he played in this tournament, like, and no joke, okay, so at the moment, the target for him is obviously become the best player in the world, because he's obviously going to be the star player in Na'Vi if they're very good, and if Na'Vi's very good, he can then be the best player in the world, potentially. Like, we don't know yet that it'll happen, but he certainly has the potential. I'm going to go one further. This guy, when you consider how young he is, and that he's still with a team that, like Flamey's very young as well, this guy literally, the ceiling for this guy really is become the best CSGO player of all time, because you look at his skill set, he has all the fucking weapons. So I would say, okay, if you asked me to pick the most complete CS player, I would actually pick Shox, okay? Because the key thing about Shox is, has amazing rifles, amazing pistols, can deal with the odd bit of secondary AWPing if you need, and is amazing at clutches. So for me, if I'm building a franchise, I'm starting with Shox, because I know I can get so much out of him, and then I know what I need to build around him. But I have to say, okay, the only thing Simple can't do, as far as I can tell, is he's not yet, like, totally unreal at clutches. He's just okay at them, you know. He's pretty decent. But in terms of actual, like, overall, like, complete player, Jesus Christ, the guy's like one of the best deagles in the world, one of the best rifles in the world, one of the best AWPs. It's actually unreal how good this guy's skill level is. And now he's doing it against the best teams in the finals, etc. So I actually think if I wanted to describe Simple right now, okay, I can't say he's the best player in the world. I can't take that away from, like, that group that at the moment I think you can interchange in him. You can take Shox, Coldzera, Nico. They're all insane right now, and any given day they all look like the best player. So I can't put him there yet, right? He hasn't given me enough tournaments. But I'll put it this way. I actually think that at the moment, Simple's probably the best impact player in the world, because every round he goes off, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the round. Like that round they had on Mirage, where he runs in against SK in the group stage.
With the deagle.
And he just kills 4 people. They only have deagles. It just like you don't.
He made it look so casual.
Aside from, like, Nico, No one can do that. No one can have that round on a fucking, like, essentially, like, a low buy. He can just win around against the best team in the whole world on one of the best team in the world's maps, by the way, and they're on CT side, and he's on T side. That's the level of impact. There's so few people can do that right now, and especially so few people who are in a team as good as he is. Like, okay, Shox is sort of in a team as good, Nico isn't, and coldzera isn't that sort of player. Like, coldzera's impact is more like consistency, grinding you down. This guy's like, he just takes over the round, you know.
Yeah, and I think the impressive thing for me, this is I think this was the first event where I really kind of saw that like Simple's game sense is like unreal. Like not even just his individual skill, but like his idea of like what's going on in that region of the map, what's going on in other parts of the map. So intelligent how he peaks. Like even that round against SK, like he gets the first kill out towards bench, I remember, with the Deagle. And to be fair, this is a mistake by SK. It's a pretty shitty crossfire they have set up, but because of the location of that guy, he knows where to look next, because that's like the logical place when you see someone there, a crossfire that's set up, and he's immediately ready to aim with the next guy and bust it up. So just his game sense of like understanding where players are going to be positioned, where they're coming from, that's what allows him to be so good. That's what really unleashes that skill. It was very rare that I saw Simple at this event get caught off guard, unless it was some kind of a mad situation where during an execution he'd lost like 3 teammates and he had to do something desperate. But like even in clutches, I never really saw him get like super outplayed in any kind of way. So I thought he had a fantastic event, and obviously, yeah, his impact for this Navi team. It shows that they haven't really won it. When was the last event they won? Actually, was it?
It was Counterpit.
Yeah, Counterpit. Since then, him coming into this team, I think it shows that's the big reason why they were pushed over the finish line.
And also, let's add this fact in. This is another crazy thing. One of the things that about Simple that's nuts is he's one of those players, there's very few like this, where he doesn't just have the skill, but he has like this mad creativity that is added into the skill that makes him even more dangerous. So there's amazing players out there. Here's a good example. I'll give you Flamey, okay? Flamey's skill is very, very high, but his actual way of playing the game is incredibly basic. Like he just takes the most obvious, like hard peek for an aim duel onto an angle, and he essentially just tries to hit shots to win. The difference is, okay, Simple not only like is very, very skilled, but he always adds these creative elements in. So the obvious example I'm thinking of is that 1v1 against Nitro where he threw the hop over the wall. It's like, you have to understand, not only would no one do that, but no one would even conceive to think to do that in that scenario, you know?
Yeah, that was also like the dumbest fucking thing in the world. When I saw that going down, I was just like, what is even happening? It doesn't even make any sense. It wasn't even a good fake. Like Nitro didn't even like move his crosshair or anything. It's just like, oh, there's an op trickling over this box. The best is when he gave the explanation on the stage. He's like, yeah, I just wanted to have the what the fuck factor.
That's sick. Imagine so how much that. The best thing is, here's all you need to know that worked, Moses. Go and watch it shows you the player cams on Liquid after he does that round, and here's the thing, they just got bodied in a sick round that's really important, and they all are like half having to laugh to themselves like, shit, yeah, fuck. Like, first of all, half of them are probably thinking like, yeah, he does do shit like that, and then the other half sort of like, shit, he kind of owned us there. Like, if you can put that feeling into the enemy, that's pretty fucking baller. That does work. That was
what, the third map of that series as well. That was the one where he just like took over. So it was like, hey guys, it's me again. Welcome back. Fuck you.
But now I'm on the other team. Remember when I used to do this on your team? Now you guess what? Now you get the treatment, bitch. Like, no, please, Simple, wreck the other guys. No, I wreck you now. Brilliant.
And then he goes home after the stream. Did you see that shade he threw at Nico as well on his stream?
Listen,
just like, fucking hell.
I love that. No, I thought you were going to talk about when he went on Twitter and he was like, hey, Smix, you are sexy.
That was so good.
That's like, again, even in real life, he does things
he did that we wouldn't conceive of. You knew he was just like birthday drunk, like championship drunk, and then just goes, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it. You are hot.
Which, by the way, Simple, was the equivalent of throwing rope over a wall. Like, that's not going to do anything, mate. It's ballsy. I give you props for the move, but... that alone is not what's going to win you that 1v1, okay? You've got to do a lot more than that. You've got to have that option. You've got to have the P250 headshot. You haven't got the P250 down part yet, okay? That's the part you have to work on, mate. So, okay. So, Simple one that was obviously the MVP of the tournament. Fantastic player. Interestingly enough, it was only really in the final where Guardian went ham. Like, in the final, he did, like, old-school Guardian shit, which, by the way, was obviously a very fitting moment for him because he'd obviously struggled recently when Navi was very good, but he wasn't that good anymore, so... I actually did. Here's the thing. Very rarely do I actually get like legit moved because unfortunately a lot of people in life have watched too many Tom Hanks movies and they just like want everything to be really moving and emotional, you know, and like it's too easy, the storyline. But actually that was a pretty cool moment, I thought. The idea that like Guardian sort of like had the final moment where he was very good and he had a team that was very good around him, and now he was beating out all these teams who used to deny him his championships type scenario, you know.
Yeah, and that picture I thought was so good. That picture taken of them, the Na'Vi team on the stage with Guardian crying. I think because that's an epic fucking picture for that event. But yeah, no, it was it was super cool to see that, because there were certain matches where he struggled. And I mean, and you'd think on Cobble against Liquid when they were getting bodied, like he had like 3 or 4 kills, like 10 rounds into the half. Like it was unreal. How ineffectual he was as an AWPer, as a player, even during that map specifically, and during a lot of maps. But yeah, I mean, to come alive in the grand finals in the third map as well and just be that dominant. He had like 36 kills and 22 of them were op kills, if I remember correctly, and like 8 of them or something were in the overtime, or 12 of them or something like that, something mad. So I mean that's big props to him, and it obviously meant a lot, which was super cool to see.
One thing I found really interesting about the way Na'Vi won the tournament as well is that it's not like them winning is one of those scenarios. Like, you know, when Luminosity won Columbus, like their first time to really win a big event, you could also tell, right, they've won, and you know what, they're the clear number one, and they're going to take over now. Like, it's their time, okay? That's not what you get the feeling of with this Na'Vi team. Like, the fun thing about Na'Vi, in fact, what ended up being great about this tournament was SK and VP, you knew were going to be the favourites anyway, so they could win the event, and they did. Certainly both of them, by the way, could have won this event the way it played out. But now, if Na'Vi's in the equation, I actually feel like now we've just got a scenario where that's going to be a really fun kind of like A beats B, beats C, beats A type scenario. I think there's a lot of potential here. So Na'Vi isn't going to be some dominant champion, I don't think. Like, for example, when I watched their tournament run here, first of all, I will give them massive props. It's insane that their actual only 3 opponents were the 3 playoff teams as well. So their actual level of who they beat, very, very good. But, for example, I mean, we already can see Cobblestone's a massive liability for them, and they're going to have to play it, because remember, they still stick with the old Na'Vi bans of Cash and Nuke, so they're going to be playing a lot of fucking Cobblestone every time they're against your SK, VP. These teams are going to be picking that map into you for sure.
Yeah, they definitely have to deepen the map pool. And I even think some of their like standout maps that you think are typically Na'Vi maps, like the Mirages, I don't necessarily think they're that much of a lockdown for Na'Vi. I don't know if they have like a map that I would feel confident on them beating teams 100% of the time. You know, like you would, I don't think they have a map that I'd favor them. Like even Train has some very, very good teams on it. Like, I mean, obviously SK is a big one. VP, despite their struggles on it against SK, I still think they're going to be very, very good against certain teams on it. So, I mean, I don't think they have a map where you'd say like this is their map. It's obviously maps they like to play, but they're not going to be. I don't think they're as dominant on these maps as Na'Vi used to be through certain stretches of CS:GO. So I think that's going to be a big worry. It is interesting. I think they're especially.
I think Mirage at the moment is like the best map for them. I would pick that.
Probably. Too. Yeah, probably. Yeah, and you imagine Dust 2 should be up there with Guardian and Simple as well.
The difference is, like, when you consider they picked Train and let Mirage be the third map, for example, in the VP, they must themselves not prefer Mirage. So,
yeah,
like I'll say to yourself, I assume they think Train is the best map.
Yep. But yeah, no, it's super cool the way this is all working out. Because I don't even think, to be honest with you, I don't think we're ever going to have like an era of SK. I mean, maybe you could count 2016 since they've won both the majors, but they're like that weird team that hasn't really been that dominant this year. Like they've dropped event, they've looked weak in events where, like, you know, when Fnatic had their dominance throughout 2015, they were just bodying people. Like they just weren't dropping maps, they were just wrecking everyone. The finals were like skewed one way. But SK on the other hand, and formerly Luminosity, while they've won the majors, I mean, they dropped ECS finals, they lost in Katowice. So I mean, they got knocked out in Malmo. Like they haven't had this dominant year, so I don't think we're in a period where any of these teams are set to like be like the era team, you know, like the dynasty.
Like I still think you can say like the period from Columbus to Cologne was like their era. It's a small one, but here's the problem that they have is because of stuff like E-League and the fact that we've moved into less tournaments, they just didn't get the opportunity to win more when they maybe would have done. Like here's the thing, if you put more lands in that period of time, I think they win a couple more. Like for example, I think if they're in E-League, they're the favourite to win that. But here's the thing, on one hand, you give them credit, okay, that's unfortunate, but you also can't like give them free credit for stuff they didn't do. Like, oh, but he would have done. Like, for example, if we're using that logic, okay, go ahead and put 2 like fucking majors in Nip's pocket, because there wasn't majors when they were the best.
Yeah.
Go ahead and give Very Games a major if they'd have had one in like fucking a certain period of time. Like, that's the problem. Sure, I agree that it would have happened, but it didn't. So we can only go on what did happen. So I agree with you in that sense, that sadly their dominance hasn't been as good as it initially seemed. Because obviously the big problem is, this is always going to be a problem in CSGO, people put too much weight on the majors. Like, to me, I'll describe it like this. An event like ESL New York, a major is like 1.5 times that event to me, okay? Still a very good event, but the major just gets the prestige, etc. But the point is, if you only won 3 ESL New Yorks, that wouldn't make you the best team of all time, for example. And so in the same way, 2 majors is sick, but you know what? It doesn't make you better than a team that has like 1 major, for example, and a gang of tournaments as well.
Yeah, I think I'm one of those people who puts way more emphasis on the major. I think it's because the players do it as well. I think the players all talk about the major as if that means more to them than these other events. I mean, here, like, I don't think SK, if they don't win I think they're still like the #1 team in the world, largely based off the fact that they've won both majors this year. I think if they hadn't won both majors, if they don't win Kelowna, I don't think they're #1. If they don't win MLG Columbus, I don't think I have them as #1. But the fact that they've won both majors,
just winning both majors isn't what automatically makes them the best team of all time or whatever, or the best team even this year. Like, if they, let's say they'd only won both majors, okay, well then that means some of those events are going to Fnatic and VP and G2. Now there'd be a real discussion: is one of them teams the best?
Yeah.
So I mean it more in that sense. The major's important. It's not the only thing that's important.
Right. Definitely.
Okay. So here's the question then. What do you see as the future for Na'Vi now?
In terms of like how high can they go?
I mean, do they go and win E-League now and IEM Oakland and go to the next major and do it really well?
I don't think I'd have them as like a favorite to win any event. I think they're one of those teams where you'd say they definitely have a chance to win. But I mean, even throughout this tournament, while they were dominant and they only dropped the 2 maps, I think there were some real weaknesses. Obviously, Cobble's going to be a weakness. I think we saw some situations where, Guardian wasn't playing very well. I still think that's very scary. And if Guardian is playing like that and Simple's not on the team, they probably lose some of those matches. They probably don't win this event. They probably don't even get to the finals. I think Liquid probably knocks them out. So I think there's still some shakiness, and especially in the map pool for Na'Vi. Where I think they're gonna have some struggles moving forward. So they definitely have to work on that, but it's still so early. I could definitely see them, coming around for the major. I think they're going to be a very scary team by the end of this year. I think that's going to be a team that a lot of people look at and are just like, oh shit, we have to play them now.
Because my big concern with Na'Vi is like it's funny, they only have 1 player change from the old Na'Vi, but to me, as a team, they're almost nothing like the old Na'Vi. Like,
they do feel very different in playstyle, don't they?
Like they're not that like grind out, slow T-side team that can get X and Y rounds. Like, to me, what's funny is I look at all the skill in the team, and they feel more to me like they're winning off like CT sides at the moment. Like, they just use the skill of the players and simple and unleash them. But on T side, they're good, but they're not. They're certainly nothing like that old Na'Vi team, which was unreal. That was like I thought they were like. It was them and SK were the clear best T-side teams in the whole world, like no one could compete. And obviously that's not just changing simple, it's the fact that you've lost Starix as the in-game leader. You can't do that, Like, and so for me, it's more like, I think Na'Vi's only going to go as far as the individuals carry them now. The system won't carry them in the way it did to Columbus finals, okay? Now, it's like, now you need your Flamey and Guardian. Basically, here's my initial win condition for them to win matches, okay? 2 out of these 3, Flamey, Guardian, Simple. 2 of the 3 must go super ham. If that happens, they can beat anyone. If they have a game where only one of them goes super ham, I think they're going to lose a lot of series in a lot of matches. So I do think, listen, 2 out of 3 is better than being like fucking G2 and having to have 2 out of 2 go amazing. So there's a better condition than that. But to me, it's more like at the moment, I see Na'Vi, they're going to settle into like 2nd or 3rd best team. I have no reason, put it this way, I have no reason right now to say they're going to be better than SK in the next 3 months.
Yeah, no, I don't think you get. They can be. You just don't have any reason to like kind of really predict it and think it's actually going to happen. I mean, while we're on the subject of Starix and not being able to in-game lead, what did you think of the first event with the new coaching rule, the new timeouts?
I wasn't really a fan of it. Like, I actually was thinking about this, and luckily this didn't happen. But it is possible if someone wanted to, they could just abuse it and do it like pointlessly for a bunch of rounds to tilt people. I think you should be able to do that once. Like, you can do it once at Stars style to fuck with someone. That's cool. You can do that, right? But I actually think
that was so epic.
There should be some kind of structure to it. Like, it should be like, okay, let's say you have 2 timeouts per half. you can only use one of them within the first 7 rounds and one within the next 8 rounds in the half, like that, something like that. So you can still have to time out when you use it, but the idea is you can't just bang them all in a row, Like if someone puts 4 in a row at the end of the match, that would ruin the fucking match,
Yeah. See, I thought it was. Yeah. I mean, that's like the nightmare situation, right? If like you, for whatever reason, you have all 4 of them at the end of the match.
Because at that point, you're not tilting the opponent; you're tilting me and the viewers at that point in time.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, that's the one big criticism. I mean, I know you might think differently because I'm going to go with basketball, but like when you get to the end of the game and like some team has like 3 fucking timeouts left, and it's like a 2-point game, and each team just like does a play, timeout, does a play, timeout.
Okay, but that's good because in that scenario, you need it to advance the ball. Actually, it's a very specific thing in basketball. But in Counter-Strike, I think it would ruin it if you could do that.
Yeah. I'm kind of very split on it because as an analyst, I thought it was very, very interesting when teams took the timeouts because they're only 30 seconds. So you saw a lot, I think, where teams weren't even trying to fix anything. They were just trying to stop momentum a lot of times. And I thought that was a very cool use. But as a commentator and as someone spectated the game, I thought it felt very jarring. It felt very stop and go. Like even as a commentator, it ruins the flow, especially because there were a couple matches that had like small tech issues that would take like a minute to fix, and then you'd have a round played, and they would call a timeout for 30 seconds, and it's just like it just messes with the flow. But I think as a player and as a team, I wouldn't mind it. I think we're just going to have to move into a system in the middle ground between what used to be and what there is now. Like I think it's actually going to become coaches can talk during freeze time, and then we go back to like 2 timeouts per map, like 1 minute per half.
Okay. So Virtus.Pro finished runners up here. Now, let's be real. They did lose the last map in 1970. Virtus.Pro could have fucking won ESL One New York. That's real. That could have happened. The interesting thing is, if they had have won it, dude, I think you have to start asking the discussion, is Virtus.Pro the best team in the world? Amazingly, because remember, here's the key thing people don't know. In history, Virtus.Pro has actually never been the number 1 team. Like, even when they won Katowice, right after they lost Copenhagen Games, so they've never actually taken the title, despite how fantastic they are. They are one of the all-time greats. So it's pretty insane to me, the idea that we finally got number 1 3 years later. Like, what the fuck? Like,
I think Virtus.Pro is by far the most impressive team at this event. By a long mile over Na'Vi, especially. I thought they essentially played 2 grand finals in one day. Like their match against SK, I think, is going to go down as like one of the historic matches in Counter-Strike. That series they had with them, that was so epic. Just like Snack, some of the shit he did against Na'Vi was insane to see that level out of him. The pistol round, the op clutch, Neo with an op clutch as well. I think this has a lot to do, I think, with one of the interesting things about Virtus.Pro that I find is because of this notion that they change roles and not players. I think, and you go back to the history of like Taz, Neo, Pasha, how long they've been playing. I think so many of these players are so versatile, and that's what actually helps them become a better team. I think they're finally starting to they've been so consistent in the past couple months, like ever since E-League, essentially, ever since the major, really. But this team is in a very, very good streak, and I think they're starting to get very dangerous on a lot of maps. And I think we're starting to get to that point where I don't even know, like this event, despite how good they were, despite how many games they won, I don't know if I ever got to a point where I said, okay, the plow has started. I think they just looked really, really solid as a team.
Okay. Let me think.
Pasha was crazy.
Here's the thing, the plow also is where you just like E-League was the plow, okay? That's where you just bang out like 8 rounds in a row, and it doesn't matter what the opponent, it's not like the opponent plays bad, they just can't do anything. Like they're trying, and everyone's just running all over you, Like the plow also, to me, is also, you can also usually tell it because like players like Pasha and Taz, who don't normally have sick games, will also be like joining in, and it becomes like a mad feeding frenzy. Yeah, I agree, that didn't really happen actually. Like, I guess VP wrecked him on like the cobblestone, but even then, like...
Well, so did Liquid.
That wasn't such a big deal, So
well, the difference is, you saw the Na'Vi players laughing during that map because Virtus.Pro was doing the most insane shit ever. Like those clutches just don't happen. Even Na'Vi was like, "Fuck it, what can we do?"
Whereas instead, the impressive thing about this was more like that whole thing I always bring, like the storyline I always bring out. It's played out so many times you might think it's cliche, but it's not. It's just the way it is. VP is just like the grittiest team fucking ever, basically. And so that's what we saw in this tournament was they could take like a punch, basically. You could hit them for a few rounds and you could start to go up, but then they were going to come right back and they were going to like get their rounds and they were going to get... So really it was like a back and forth game the whole way through the tournament to get to this point. So that's what was insane about it, because it showed like a level of consistency almost in VP that you don't normally see, actually. I think for the whole tournament they showed that. So I agree. I think VP could have won this tournament. I think VP's pretty sick at the moment.
The question becomes, do they win the tournament if they don't play the semis and the finals in the same day? Because, I mean, against SK, they had, 3 overtimes on Overpass. They had 1 overtime on Mirage. Then they had to wait a couple hours, and then they played, the first 2 maps, which were kind of blowouts both ways. And then an overtime on Mirage at, it started at, 1 o'clock in the morning or some shit. Was that third map of the grand finals?
I obviously think you shouldn't have to play the same 2 matches in the same day. With that said, though, I will just say, to anyone from VP who wants to complain about, we got unlucky, let's be real, there's also a world in which we replay that match against SK and you're losing 2-0. That can happen as well, mate, That was an incredibly close first 2 maps, so
yeah.
It can go both ways on that one, Let's talk about that, though, because that series SKVP, here's the problem with that series, Moses. First 2 maps, fucking insane. Really good. Reminds me of map 1 and map 3 at the Major, where Cobblestone and Mirage, amazing maps, some of the best CS you've ever played, great. But this time, we had a third map. It was the second map at the Major. That was Nuke. And just like that, total shit. This time, amazing, that was VP doing it, and then 1 T-side of Nuke. That map was dog shit.
Nuke as a map is just dog shit. Why is it, when I saw Nuke come up as the third map, I was like, fuck this. This epic series just gets fucking played out decided on Nuke. At least this time Virtus.Pro won it. How crushing would that have been if, again, they have a series where they can beat SK, they're going into the third map and it's fucking Nuke and they just get steamrolled on it. That would be so depressing if VP fell the same way twice. But yeah, I mean, those, I don't know. I think if you wipe Nuke out of that, look at that Overpass game was so fucking insane. How many overtimes VP had to force? They won 6 match points. SK had 6 match points and VP won them all to force overtime and then in overtime. I mean, that's just insane to do. The resiliency they showed was insane.
Oh, by the way, here's the thing. So I gave VP a lot of shit at the Major, you remember. I wrecked him, that Nuke pick, you just threw away the series there. Give yourself a third map as a chance to do it, if it was trained there, you have a real chance to win the series. Also, you ruined a great series. Now it's SK's turn, because if you remember the way the veto went, SK was the last to ban. And the 2 maps left was Cobble and Nuke. And it's true, VP beat SK recently on Cobble. SK actually lost on Cobble they didn't lose on this tournament, but they'd be banning it at this tournament, okay. Yeah. So, for whatever reason, SK didn't want Cobble. Now, I still, to this moment, even if VP's practiced Nuke, think VP thought that they'd won the veto and they were forcing SK to pick Cobble as the last map. Right? I think that's what they wanted. And if it had been Cobble as the last map, what a fucking end to the series that would be. Yeah. So, while I don't blame SK for losing on Nuke, because no one could know that was going to happen, one of these motherfuckers is supposed to ruin the series for us again. Why are you doing this? There are no such thing as good games on Nuke. There are people winning Counter-Strike on Nuke. Please do not pick Nuke.
Please, for the love of God. Especially as a third map. If you're going to pick it, make it your pick early on so we don't have to deal with it if it goes all 3.
So when you consider that SK, again, I put it this way, if SK goes to the final, I don't care what you say. I think SK beats that Na'Vi. I'll take him to win that, I actually think it could have happened.
Yep.
So it's weird because this SK team, it was actually the same thing, I think, as Na'Vi at Columbus, okay? The 2 reasons Na'Vi made the final at Columbus was, 1, Edward, in theory, one of the worst players on the team, of a fantastic team, by the way, had an amazing tournament, and on top of that, the system got them that far. Even without their star player playing well. What's great is, same thing here. Cold Zero, here's the thing, if you put down the top 20 players in the world, Cold Zero had a very poor tournament for a top 20 player. It was not the stats were not good at all. He didn't have a lot of impact.
Yeah.
And yet they managed to almost make the final. I think they could have even still won the tournament with him having such a poor tournament. So anyone who thinks that Cold Zero is just it's him making everyone on his team good and he's the reason the whole system works, no, that's ridiculous. He's not the one driving the machine in that sense. He's a very good player and he probably does need to play their best for them to be the unbeatable SK. I agree there totally. He's an amazing player, but this system in SK is unreal as well.
Yeah, no, it actually is. I mean, and that's the beauty of having a system like that. And this is the system that most teams, even some of the other top teams, don't have, where your star player Cold can't have what is a bad tournament for him. And let's not lie. This is just more a testament to how good Cold has been, but this was a bad tournament. He still ended with a 1.02 rating, still had +7 kills overall, but just didn't have the same kind of impact. But this is the benefit of having that system, is when he's having this kind of an off event compared to the rest of his events throughout the year, they still are in a position position to make the grand finals, to potentially win the grand finals. I mean, props to SK, props to Fallen for having this kind of a system. But yeah, obviously, if Cold's playing a little bit better, they probably do win that series and make the finals. But yeah, it's definitely is that SK system that makes Cold into one of the best players in the world, not the other way around, in my opinion. But still, I mean, even in this series overall, Fallen was the only one who had a great series. Fur was actually terrible as well. Fur was like negative 23, 73 ADR.
The thing is, the stats hide one fact, which is that in the first 2 maps against VP, FNX was going ham, but his problem is on nuke, he shit the bed completely. He had like 7 kills. So it meant his overall average looked really bad, but I have to give him props. He was like doing absolute work those first 2 maps. And you know FNX's style, this guy's a fucking monster. I mean, I have to say, I've got to call out one thing, by the way. There was a round where coldzera and FNX won like a 2v3 against VP, which just showed how VP, here's the thing, their style is fantastic, it's amazing to watch, but some of their players are borderline fucking brain dead. Because this 2v3, go watch it, it's on Mirage, and they're in the B site, and what happens is, they're on like a half buy or something, so coldzera has like a CZ, and he stood right on the B site, basically, on the other side of one of the pillars. And he kills someone, first of all, right, and then gets traded on. Now, FNX is in a 1v2, and all he does is sit in the window. Someone's over planting the bomb in the left part that you'd see from the window as a CT, that pillar, and someone else is behind the bench. The guy behind the bench, for no reason, just pops his head backwards out, gets killed, and then the guy who plants just runs straight out and gets killed. Like, the way they played this 2v1 was so... like, they didn't even clear the site, basically. They didn't. It was so brain dead, it was unreal. Unless oh, wait a second. Maybe it was Na'Vi that they did that again. No, they can't. They didn't play Na'Vi. What? It must be... Maybe... wait a second. Am I thinking of when they played Na'Vi on Mirage? Let me think. Whoever they played it against. It was one of the two, and both teams have a bunch of brain-dead players in. So, the point is, that's like a round that, like... That's a round where, like, yeah, you did your good job yourselves, but, like, they gave you a massive help with how stupidly they played the round up. But anyway, point was, he just played a very great fundamentals tournament. I think that's why he got great stats. So... I actually think overall, though, SK did look a bit off. I mean, it's a testament to how good they are. They still almost made the final, but everything was a little bit off. Like, okay, even Fallen was kind of a bit suspect. Like, he had that one good map. I think it was against VP. I think, yeah, that was right. He had that one good map where he went ham, and by the way, that seems to be his map. But aside from that, even he was a bit underwhelming, you know.
Yeah, but like, listen, I don't know how the fuck Virtus.Pro won Overpass. That is a map they probably should have lost this series 2-0, oddly enough, because how they overcame Fallen playing that way in Overpass, he was fucking incredible going into those overtimes, end of regulation. He was a fucking monster. I don't know how VP did it. It's so insane to me still. I need to watch that back. But like, Fallen just seemed like he was just going to carry his team forward.
They started hitting the fucking other side a lot more every time they had like a gun bound or something.
Yeah, but he still rotated and won like a 1-on-2 in some like impossible situation. Yeah. It's just like he hit God mode for like 12 rounds and they somehow outlasted it. So what the fuck ever. I don't even know how to explain it, but that was unreal. Those first 2 maps of that series were some of the best I'd seen in a long time in Counter-Strike.
You know, people took that meme where it says like Fallen isn't even the best AWP in SK. Like, first of all, if you understand that's a meme, okay, haha, it's an okay joke. But if you actually believe that, kill yourself. Like, if you think that anyone in that team is better at AWPing than Fallen, you don't need to live on this planet anymore. And we really need to get rid of some of this carbon emissions that's coming from your body. So, you know what to do. Take that clutch scroll and get the fuck off planet Earth. Like, we don't need you, mate. We don't need you. Because, by the way, Fallen is an unreal AWPer. Let's be real.
I mean, you'd say he's probably, you could argue he's one of the best in the world. I mean, he's definitely top 3, I think.
Yep. I mean, first of all, I do have him the best guy. I just think he is. Especially because what I think's amazing about him is, like, he's the only primary AWPer I know who, because he's the in-game leader and he's super smart, has like different ways of using it depending on if he's hitting his shots. Like if he's not hitting his shots, he does these super weird like push-ups on CT for info, or like goes really close range, and like the stuff he does is like where you'd never expect the AWPer to be out of choice. You know, he does really weird things that the classic Guardian Kenny S Skadoodle AWPer would never do. They just go to their spot still and they try to like basically their logic is like, I missed last time, I must try really hard this round. Like that sort of player can only go as well as his aim goes, basically. Fallen has like an insane like smartness to his AWPing that no one else seems to have.
Yeah, no, I think Fallen is by far the best opera in terms of using his mobility in really awkward situations to grab intel, to find out he does that shoulder peek where he just baits out a shot, finds out where you are, and then he'll peek you. I mean, he's just unreal in so many different scenarios of the op. So yeah, definitely the best opera in terms of mobility using that weapon.
To contrast, okay, in the scenario you're talking about, when he shoulder peeks to know where you are and then decide if he wants to take the duel or not, Kenny S and Guardian peek and try to kill you faster than they kill them. You understand the difference in mentality is the point we're making here. The point is, in this scenario, Fallen has two ways to win. He can peek, choose to peek you and kill you, or he can have someone rotate in, help him do. Those two guys have one condition to win. They have to hit the shot. So here's the thing. Now, they're so amazing when they're at their peak. That'll be amazing in itself. But it's just a different mentality. And so you can see how he adds something a little bit extra to his team. Okay, what do you think is the future for SK? What happens to SK in the next 4 months, Moses, leading into the next major?
I don't think anything. What they have Oakland. Are they going to Epicenter? Are they one of the teams at Epicenter?
Let me double check for you. You keep talking. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think SK is probably going to. I got to imagine they're going to at least win one event, one of those events before the major. I mean, I don't think they're a team that's in danger of really losing too much of a step because of, like we said, that system.
Yeah, they're going to Epicenter.
They're going
to everything essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they win Epicenter or Oakland, maybe both. I mean, they're still, I think, going into these tournaments, you got to say they're one of the favorites to win it, despite only getting third, fourth place here to an epic series with Virtus.Pro. But I think any team but Virtus.Pro loses to SK 2-0 in that series. Especially with the way they played on Overpass, the level Fallen hit. So I'm not worried about them in any sense. I think they're still the number one team in the world, and definitely I think going into the major, I think they have at least 1 to 2 more tournament wins under their belt before the major even comes about. And obviously it's going to be fun for them, to get to sit back and watch that fucking hellish major qualifier. That's going to be insane. So yeah, they're fine. They're still the best team in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm actually going to go ahead and give SK a little bit of a pass because they have not been active since ESL One Cologne. They didn't go, well, for E-League they didn't have a choice, but they obviously didn't go to any land since then. They had the scenario with Fur where they wouldn't want to anyway because they were waiting for him to come back. Obviously the Pro League is all they've been playing. So I think they were a little bit rusty, I have to say. They hadn't played on land for a while. And so I give them a little bit of credit in that sense that they were still very good, but they just didn't have everything. They didn't have the routine down. So I expect the next lands, Epicenter, Oakland, I think they're going to be better immediately. They're going to get back to that level of being really good. Now, the key point is, even if they're as good as they were at Cologne, there's teams that are better than in Cologne. Think about who was in Cologne. Fnatic. Okay, VP's even probably a little bit better. So Fnatic's not there anymore, but now you've got Navi's a lot better. Navi had dropped off then. Now we've got Team Liquid's coming back. G2 still in the mix there. I think the field's a little bit better, so I don't think they can be as dominant, but I agree. I would still put them as the favourite for any tournament they enter. I mean, think about this tournament, okay? So with Navi, I gave you an obvious weakness. T-sides weren't super dominant, and they lost Cobblestone every time. So now think about SK. They only lost 3 maps in this tournament. They lost once to Navi, who turned out to be very good on Mirage. They won Mirage against VP, who's amazing on Mirage, so it's not like Mirage is a problem. They lost Overpass, only in fucking mega overtime, and to one of the few other really good Overpass teams. And then they lost Nuke, which they're never going to play anyway. So I think you look at it, they still have the best map pool. They still have all these strengths. Cold Zero is not going to play like that 3 tournaments in a row. He's going to come back and be amazing. So I think I agree. SK, they win some of these tournaments, and for the next major, they probably still enter as the favourite, I think. I think unless something drastic happens, like Navi wins everything or VP go God mode, I think it's SK's going to stay number one. I don't know how long, though, but at the moment, it's not like their era isn't over because of this one tournament, put it that way.
Yeah, and I think the big thing as well is if you look to the majors, I mean, there have been very few teams who can consistently challenge this team in best of 3 series. Like VP is like one of the only teams to like do that. Navi, as we saw, can challenge them in like a best of 1.
And that's why, because VP is one of the only ones with the map pool where they're not like godly scared of a map.
Yeah, and I think even Navi would struggle against SK in a BO3. I mean, I still think VP is like the biggest danger that SK has.
Yeah, I agree. So okay, the Team Liquid. Obviously, they actually were like, they won a map against Navi. They were one of the only teams to do that. They beat Fnatic twice. They beat G2. Yeah. In fact, the only teams they lost to was they lost one map to VP Mirage. They lost a Mirage to Navi, and they lost Dust 2 and Train to Na'Vi. So okay, they lost 4 maps in the tournament. What did you think of Team Liquid overall?
I thought they were sick, especially compared to where I had them. Like worried about them, seeing them online for so long, really struggling. And like this to me, because like the big thing was when I'm thinking about them in the rankings of North America, like they hadn't budged down any farther. Because I mean, you look at them and you have to say, you know, they've deserved the credit of maintaining that position until we see them at New York, especially because they've been pretty inactive in the North American scene. They didn't go to Northern Arena. They've just done some online leagues and everything like that, and they've looked like shit. So this was really worrying, but I thought they looked phenomenal. I mean, obviously, you know, that series against Na'Vi was close in the first 2 maps. The third map was a wipeout when Simple went nuts, but they crush them on Cobble, and then even on Train putting up a fight like that, especially when you consider they only got 7 rounds on their CT side. Like they had to put up a monster T-half. That was amazing from them, I thought, losing very narrowly. I think I still have some questions about their map pool. Obviously, beating Fnatic twice on Dust 2, which is not easy to do, is pretty crazy, especially with the first map. They came back from, I think, 14-8, and they made an 8-round run at the end there to win that. That's pretty nuts. I think Liquid is actually one change away from being able to contend consistently with Tier 1 teams.
What
and I think
that, though?
They need, well, it's not a change, it's just, well, like not a roster change. I think they need to find some way. Liquid still has not found a way to have oppers thrive. They have JDM, they have the best opper in North America, and they still don't know. He still has looked like he doesn't have an identity on this team, and I know he probably feels it as an individual player, but the fact that he doesn't really have any early round impacts. Like even when they switched into double op against Fnatic, it was Nitro who was being the aggressive one. It's almost like they have JDM in some kind of like structure where they say we only want you to do this and this, and then when they have a second op, it's like Nitro, oh, you're a second op. We don't really have a plan for a second op, so you just get a lot of freedom. But I don't know if that's the case. I haven't talked to him about that, but it just seems like JDM for his skill set, he should be having much more an impact on this game. And I think as soon as they kind of figure that out and find a way to unleash him a little bit, this is going to be a scary team to the top teams in the world.
Oh, that's something I totally agree with, by the way. So, for example, like I said, Cold Zero didn't do very well in his team, contrasted to what you expect from him, and yet they almost won the tournament. Well, you look at JDM, I mean, this LAN was actually pretty bad, actually, overall for this guy. I mean, his frags really low down, he had a bad differential for the whole tournament, and yet his team had a pretty good tournament run overall. Yeah. So, I agree, that's a waste of talent there. Like, he should be used better. That's the most obvious player that needs to be brought out of him. Then you've got to add in, like, they need a fucking map pool. I don't know how they got by on this map pool they have at the moment. Like, part of it is people were doing the craziest vetoes against them. I don't know how people were veto. Like, if I was some analyst for the teams playing them, they never get some of these maps, mate. I mean, look at what they played. In the group stage, they played 2 Mirages, a Train, and 2 Dust 2s. And then in the playoffs, they played Train, Dust 2, and Cobble. So, I mean, some of these are ridiculous. Like, why some of the maps people are giving them is, like, just baffling to me, you know. Like, I don't know why Fnatic kept giving them Dust 2. I don't know what they were thinking in that particular sense there, you know. So, I think the map pool has to grow more. This reminds me more of Liquid at Columbus than it does at Liquid at Cologne in that sense, you know. Like, skating by a bit because people haven't figured out yet what maps to ban against you. But it also obviously was massively powered by Elige just going super ham. Like, he's never had a LAN that was close to this good. In fact, this is better than probably almost any NA player's ever had a LAN. I mean, you'd have to go back to old school, like fucking Hiko, like maybe, I don't think even Swag probably had a LAN as good as this. When you consider like all the opponents you played, how high level the matches are, Elige was very, very good in this one.
Elige is a player, they can beat anyone in the world if Elige has a tournament like this. And that's the tough part because Elige is still very young. I think the other big issue for Liquid is the mentality of Elige, because we see he has really rough games, and when you go really rough, when you have disparity like from in a player, especially that young, I think it has a lot to do with mentality coming into these games. And I mean, I'll tell you this story because Anders and I commentating that third map, Liquid versus Na'Vi in the series on that.
Was that the series where you said that Liquid would beat Na'Vi?
Yeah, that was the one.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. Still angry about that, huh, Duncan?
Piece of love. You remember?
I am not a crook.
Do you like that?
Oh, fucking, that was good.
You know, the sad thing is, by the way, I'll just reveal this quickly. People think because I was so smooth that was a joke and I intended to
I thought it was a joke.
Piece. No, I actually, here's the thing. I didn't know they were coming back to us that quickly. I thought it would be a break or something. So I actually was, in my very slow manner that I always say it, going to say piece of shit. But luckily, when I said peace, I saw myself come on camera and I just went, peace and love. Like, I just styled it out, you know. I was absolutely about to call you on live on stream a piece of shit just for predicting Team Liquid to win the series and then smiling at the camera as you did it. Like, yes, that was what I was going to do, Moses. But I'm a pro, so I styled it out. So.
But no, that third map on Dust 2, it was like I knew they were going to lose this map so early on, and then it's because of Elish. Where I don't know if I think they had the setting where the chat didn't actually go out, or they had like the camera covering over where the player chat is, but it was like 5 or 6 rounds in, and I think it turned into like a 1-on-3 with Elish in the A bomb site, and Simple jumped up with like a P250 and headshot him, did like the whole Kaylee thing, in that A bomb site on Dust 2, and I mean, to be honest, like, you're in a 1-on-3, by the way, with like 50 or like 25, 30 HP, you're not going to win this round anyway, so there's no reason to get fucking upset by a jumping pistol shot to your face, right? Like, you're not going to win that round. You just aren't. And as a professional player, you have to like have some kind of like mental safeguard against getting tilted against like that. But Elish just types out something like, "Oh, super cool. Like, I'm not even bothered by jumping shots anymore. Like, I'm not even like surprised by jumping shots, whatever it is." But at that point, the guy's obviously fucking tilted off the face of the planet. Like, he's just done. And Elish, I think, is, especially as that player, because you and I know like some of the behind the scenes, like that, when you go back to Cologne, he was one of the players, like I know you've talked about it, that Nick's Simple staying on the team. Yeah. And so he is a player that suffers very much from a mentality that dictates how he plays the game. And I think at that moment I was just like I like looked at Anders and I think I even brought it up in the broadcast, but at that moment I was just like, well, Elish is tilted. They're not going to win this map. It's over. Well,
and he has a rep even in his own team of not only being a tilter, but the problem is because his personality is a very passive. I mean, he even said as a joke when they asked him about beating Fnatic, like, I'm just a boring person, like I wasn't hyped by it, No. The problem he has is because he's a very introverted guy. When he tilts, he doesn't scream and shout. He just shuts down, and that's actually one of the worst things. Like it's one thing if you like. It's not better to tilt and rage and all this. Like, that's not great in its own way, but at least in that sense, you kind of know, like. First of all, you're letting it out a little bit. People know you're super rage. In his sense, it's almost like you have to notice by how quiet he gets that, like, oh, he's tilted off the face of the earth. Like, and then in that scenario as well, I don't really know how you get through to guys like that. Like, that's a tough nut to crack.
I mean, even as a player, I've played with the teammates who go like fucking rage mode, right? Who just like freak out. Like, I guess you call like the Zeus type of rager, and then you have the players like Elish who are like the Elish type of shutdown, where they just stop talking, they just stop performing. It's much easier to bring someone down from like that angry rage than it is to bring someone up from like the depths of just non-communication and just feeling like they don't give a shit. That kind of like shutdown spreads to other players much quicker than the angry raging. So yeah, I think that's his next step as a player, is he needs to get that under control. The good news is, much like Simple, who, I mean, ironically, they both suffer from like the same kind of thing, where they're both very, very talented, but they both have those personality issues that make them very, very difficult to play with and be teammates with. That's probably why they don't get along very well. But they're both young, 19. We've seen Simple starting to work through his issues. Elish needs to work on the same thing. I think one big thing as well with this Liquid team is Peacemaker shows a very good job now, 2 events in a row that they've come in with like not knowing how they'd be. The major with Simple, and now ESL One New York, where he puts together phenomenal game plans for these LAN events, for these tournaments. He obviously comes in with a lot of research, and I mean, you could see during the timeouts, he's got like 3 notepads in his hand. So I mean, his system that he's doing, I think he's turning out to be a very, very strong coach. For this team. I think the big thing that I don't know if it's him so much, but I think they need to find some way to loosen up online. I think this is where you need to try and like really experiment with systems that allow JDM as an opper to have a lot of freedom and just take over games for you online, because they're probably not going to qualify for Pro League finals in Brazil. And I think when you look at some of the online qualifiers that are coming up, they need to find a way to have success. It's that same kind of conundrum VP is in, where they should be at every LAN event, but if they can't fucking qualify online, they're not going to be. So they need to find out some system that's going to work online.
I know because of Simple being insane at the major, a lot of people were like, fuck, why did we pick this Pimp guy up? Like, it's a waste of time. Like, he's not going to be any good. And obviously he's not going to be Simple. Like, I agree with that. If I did, put it this way, I like Pimp, but if I had the choice, Simple or Pimp, I would go with Simple. Now, that never was the choice anyway, but I will say this, like, there's a reason why he's picked up. Now, I was one of the people who vouched heavily for Pimp. Like, I told Team Liquid, I know he wants out of SK, you know, like it's not a good scenario there. He knows he can't get into Dignitas and Astralis at the moment, so he's finally willing to really go to America and give it a shot, you know. And I know he's a guy who has a good work ethic and that he wants to get good again. And key detail, I knew he was good in the past. As early as like, you know, late autumn 2015, he was a very good player. So the key thing is, I thought if you could get all the environmental issues solved, I thought he could get back to being a very good player. Now, he wasn't amazing here, but he was pretty solid. Like I think he was good here. He showed good rounds, good tournament, pretty good maps in general. So I think that's a positive going forwards. Like I think that's a great stabilizing force. Where if he can play solid, now you can start to work on like what are we doing with Nitro, what are we doing with JDM. That's where you can really figure out the other kind of the wrinkles in the team. So I think that's already. It's only one event in, but it's already starting to show itself to be a quality addition.
Yeah, I think that's the one key detail for Pimp because people did look at that as a little bit lackluster as well. But I mean that was the thing. He came to me as well, like right around DreamHack Austin. And he said, "Hey, when you're at Austin, can you like put some feelers out and see like what organizations in NA might want to be looking for like a roster change and looking to bring over a European? I'm willing to give this a shot, blah blah blah." And I think from talking to some of the players in Liquid, I think that whole pickup is going really well in terms of the players and how they like the team is operating at the moment. And yeah, he doesn't have to do anything crazy. I mean, that's the cool thing is like Pimp. I mean, he has very good fundamentals and he can just be a very solid player and have his impact. Right, he can be like the FNX of Liquid, and that's kind of what they look for out of him. And if he reaches back to that peak that we saw, because there was a moment where he was like a dominant player. I was at Dignitas, one of those Danish. Yep. I mean, he was like a dominant player for them for like a good 2 or 3 months during the summer. He was so good. So if he gets back there, that just gets even better.
Yep, agreed. Let me think. Who else is worth talking about here? Okay, let's throw a little bit on Optic, because obviously Optic...
Yeah.
Let's be real, okay, here's the thing. The Train lost to Fnatic. Okay, maybe that's one where you can say Fnatic wasn't that sick of this tournament, but losing to Train to SK and VP and Cobble to VP, I can't really fault you that much for that. Everyone should lose those maps to those teams. So there's 2 lives out of the window immediately that I can't really blame you for. But beating Astralis on Cash, beating on Overpass and G2 on Cash, these are teams on some of their best maps. Like, these are legit, you know, so...
Yeah.
What do you think about Optic's run?
Well, first, you can give them a pass all you want for like losing Train to SK, which they're going to lose that to SK. But why the fuck are you letting that in the map pool? This is like that typical like North American team where it's like, yes, this is a good map for you, but like you can't do that. You can't
Moses,
Yeah.
Here we go. Are you ready? Here's the veto. So you know you have 3 bans in this tournament, right? 3 bans. So Optic banned Dust 2 and Nuke.
Oh, fucking hell. Why?
In what universe would you not want to play SK on Dust 2, for example?
Yeah. Oh, in what universe do you have 3 bans and like put Train in? They're like they're the best team on Train in like the world. Like I don't care how confident you are on this map. You like teams. Yeah, I mean, I hope this is a...
No, but listen, bro, listen, if we're hitting our shots and we get, like, hyped up, you know, like, I think we can go to a tournament, man. Like, I think we can do this, man. Like, bro, you know, like, fucking up. What kind of mad frat house is NA CSGO, mate?
I don't understand. I don't understand it. So, yeah, I mean, outside of those, obviously, Fnatic... I don't think Fnatic should have beat him that bad on Train. That's actually insane, 16-3. But, yeah, I mean, Optic over G2. We talked a little bit about G2. I think that was more them being a little bit underwarming. I'm still... Like, this was a sick tournament for them, but like it still doesn't
that is legit, by the way. So they lose to SK on Train. The very next map they play Fnatic on Train. They're like, listen, we'll show now that we're really good on Train. And then they're literally just like, Daddy, please, Olaf, stop spank. I know what more. Like, come on, mate, you just showed you fucking dog shot on Train. What are you doing? What are you doing? Fucking garbage. Mate, Wenton got more kills than any of them on Train. Retire Train. It must leave your map pool now. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's so good for them in North America. That's why. But still, I mean, at a certain point, you've got to just say, yep, let's not play the best team in the world on this map. And then, we just got crushed on it. Let's not play Fnatic on Train either, which is... So, anyways, moving along. This run they had, I mean, granted, the one thing that worries me, it's a cool run, and obviously it's great to see Optic, stringing together some wins against Europeans. And especially reaffirming how good they've looked online in North America since Tarek joined the roster. This is a cool run for them, but like G2 wasn't playing well at this event. Astralis hasn't been playing well for a long, long time. They're good wins, yeah, but I mean, you got to say those are against 2 teams that just had like Astralis is shit right now. G2 had a really bad event. The most impressive win to me is almost beating Virtus.Pro on Cobblestone. That's a really, really cool match, 14-16 to VP. But still, this is just a good step. This team needs to be able to do this consistently, right? So I mean, it's all looking forward to the next tournament they go to. Are they going to be able to build on that? I think the big thing you can say for Optic, Tarek looks better than he ever did in CLG. Tarek looks way, way better than he ever did in CLG.
And for the moment, the whole get Daps the fuck out of there. Okay, Tarek, it's working, mate. You got in.
Yeah.
You got E-League offline, and this is working. So I'll give you the credit so far, mate. It's working.
Yep. And Stan's the caller. He had a good game calling, or a good event calling. I think this is one of the events as well, because you've brought this up. I mean, Mixwell was consistent for the most part. He had a couple bad games on the first day of the event, but for after that, I think he did all right. This is one of the events where Naf played well. I know he's a player that goes up and down.
That's the one that concerns me there, though. Like
yeah.
Tarek, Mixwell, okay, I expect them to be good. I think the Naf one's a bit of fool's gold if you think that's going to happen often. You know, I feel like that's like a one-off. You know.
What worries me is I want to see how did Rush do for this team at the event overall. Let me see.
I'd assume not very well.
Yeah, no, he had a really bad event. That's what scares me the most, because I really do. I mean, I've mentioned it a couple times. I think Rush really needs to take that next step pretty soon here. He's had a couple. He didn't do. I mean, that was online, but yeah, I mean, he needs to do much better than he did at this event. I think he's like the next big step for this team, in my opinion, is him to take that next step into being a star. Although for the moment, I mean, it's all right. He had a bad event. Tarek and Mixwell obviously going to be the top two, but if Rush can be that third star, because I know we've had the conversation on the show where that third player doesn't. It just has to be that guy who can play decent, but like win you a map here or there. It doesn't have to be like some kind of consistent force. So I think that's kind of where Rush is right now.
Like, yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I think the G2 win was very legit. That one was like, you know, I don't expect that. Like, I think if they played again, I would probably still pick G2 to win that game.
Yep.
Like, that one's very legit. The Astralis one, I agree. Astralis is still looking a bit whack. Like, it's hard to put a lot of faith in them, you know? I think they're okay, but they've got, let's put it this way, their own problems are going to give you an in, and then having people overperform is going to get you there, you know? Like, that one didn't really impress me that much. So, yeah, the problem with it was the storyline of them winning all the games in a row looks really cool. But for the overall event, I mean, they shouldn't have been in the playoffs. Like, they finished basically where they should have, if not ever so slightly higher. So it's cool for them. It's a stacked event. But I'm not super hyped that they're going to do this again, put it that way.
I mean, the question becomes, do you think that is this them maybe not taking advantage, but getting the benefit of going to an event where pretty much every team that came into this, that's like a top 10 team outside of like VP, was a little bit slumping. Like Fnatic wasn't at the top level. Obviously, Astralis definitely not at their top level, looking bad. G2 didn't play to their top level. So I mean, at a certain point, I know it sucks to say this, and I know it's going to be like I'm going to get a bunch of fucking hate from Optic fans because I've been so critical of them and Tarek and everything. But I don't know if any win here really confirms that this is them winning or just, you know, being in a situation where a lot of these top teams they played are just not playing well. I don't think we've hit that level where we can make that leap to saying Optic is that team that did actually beat all these teams.
Well, I mean, luckily, obviously, we've got A-League coming soon, and then this, and then the major qualifiers. So we're going to find out soon enough. But I agree. I'm still holding back on the new Optic lineup a bit. Like, I still feel like they're just gonna, like, for me, they're just going to be a third or fourth best NA team. I don't see them making I don't think they're ever going to make out playoffs groups that are major Broadway.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing is, as you say, Cloud9 has looked better than them, and Liquid has looked better than them. Because the tough thing is, when I was watching these Optic games, they didn't really seem to be doing anything special, you know? They didn't seem to be like this, like they just won fights. Like they don't have any, it's still like that same style that Daps had as an in-game leader where it's very basic. You're not blown away by any of the tactics, any of their decision making, but you know, their players just played well and they won the fights they had to.
What did you think of the new Fnatic?
The new Fnatic. I don't, they didn't look great. Olaf still isn't back to form. I think Dennis was their best player. Twist is still very good. I thought Wenton had an awful tournament. I think they're still
when you consider Wenton has only played 2 big lands, both in Fnatic, by the way.
Yeah.
He has been shit.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking, go look at the stats. The fragging is unbelievably bad. Like we're talking like Gob B at his worst fucking levels. Now, obviously, his role in the team is not main fragger, but there's no such. Okay, you know that whole clutch round, kill yourself. There's no role in all of Counter-Strike that is never kill people and get killed yourself twice as much. Like that role, it doesn't exist. Like I don't care if you're like if Fifth Lauren did that, which I guess he did at certain points in his career. No, there's no excuse in the universe for that. Like there's no flashbang you can throw that makes it worth your team always being 4v5 essentially. That doesn't exist. I'm sorry.
I mean, let's just put it this way: that second Dust 2 match against Liquid that they lost 12-16. You'd have to. I mean, these for a professional player, I fucking hate doing this, but 5 kills and 20 ADR in that game. That's what 28 rounds of Counter-Strike.
Like that is like you not only didn't contribute, you were just like a fucking walking ATM for the opponent, ensuring their economy is topped up. You're like that annoying guy in fucking American restaurants who comes over when you drunk a sip of water and fills it up again. Like, yeah, okay, I've got enough water. More water, sir? I'm not giving you tips for water. There's no water performance. I think even
Flusha at Katowice was averaging more damage per round just with nades. Something crazy like if I remember that correctly, he was just smashed. But like that's hard to do that. So he had a bad event. I think Twist is obviously gonna. I mean, everyone has known that he's gonna be a crazy talent at some point coming out of Sweden. So I think this will be his chance. Olaf, I thought. I mean, he didn't. I don't think he had bad stats or anything, but he just didn't have the level of impact we're used to seeing out of him. I think the big things are going to be the Lecro and Wenton are going to be 2 players because Wenton was I mean, I don't know what they saw in him, but I know when he rang in for Olaf Meister during the first Fnatic, they had to have had faith in him from that. And then Lecro, from what I can recall, has only really had 1 good tournament before this. So I think those are the 2 big question marks where they're hoping that this team, this is where you look at this lineup, this Fnatic lineup, and they say these are the guys that need to be a long-term payoff because these are the guys they need to train up, right? So the question was, how long do they actually get? Because this team has to go through the minor system, don't they?
Yep, as far as I know.
Yeah. So, and I don't, yeah. So I mean, they're going to have a tough time. They're going to have to go through that major qualifier again. Another team that you could very easily see Olaf not being in the next major.
Yeah, the problem I see with this team is, like, Twist delivered. Twist was good. I thought he was good. Dennis, I still think is the best player in the team for my money. The problem they have is, you look at the other players. Okay, Lecro to me is just too inexperienced. Like, I think the only reason Lecro's at this level is because Fnatic had to pull the trigger on getting someone. Twist's already going anyway. So I think it's a mixture of politics and no one else available. Like, I don't think Lecro should be at this level yet. To me, he should be in a Godsent, Epsilon type team, or maybe Nip, who's on a lower level, takes a chance on him. That's one thing, okay?
Yeah.
He shouldn't be at the Fnatic, like that, the name brand level where that team was always top 40. Yeah, he shouldn't be with an Olafmeister yet, in my opinion. Like, I don't think he's ready for it. And so he should be showing it at a lower level. And then also, against lesser opponents, you'd see if he's progressing. So the problem with him is I don't have any reason right now to think he's going to become really good. So that basically leaves one guy, which is Olafmeister. If Olafmeister can improve his level, they can be dangerous, okay? But even then, in that world, where you've got Twist, Dennis, Olafmeister, okay, you got firepower now. Now you would be an upset threat, right? I still don't see you winning a lot of series and getting deep, put it that way. So
yeah.
I have to say, listen, Godsent is fucking appalling, but the future for Fnatic is only a bit brighter. It's not very bright, put it that way. I think both teams are doomed to be like low top 10 teams. I have to say, there's nothing in either of them to give me much faith right now.
Listen, it was all along, Kong, just to get Nip back to being the best team in Sweden again. It's been too long since we had Nip at the top. I mean,
you think the whole time, like, fucking Freiburg was just like hanging around with like a flasher, like, shit, man, Olafmeister, who the fuck you think he is? You're the best player in Fnatic. You're the best player. You know what? I bet if you went and play with Godsent, but if we went and play with Fnatic, then they'd see how good you are. And then meanwhile, Get Right's over there with like fucking Dennis and Olafmeister the whole time. Like, listen, boys, come on. Like, JW, he's shit. We you know what? We only asked him to join our team as a joke. We wanted him to the new Freiburg. He's fucking overrated, isn't he? Also, that little piece of shit shot me with a shotgun once. Fuck that kid. And then Olafmeister says, yeah, he does buy a shotgun. That is fucking bullshit, isn't it? Like, and he's not even good. I'm better than him with the AWP. Like, yeah, you're better than him with the AWP. Kick that motherfucker out. Get Lecro. So, like, Nip just secretly, like, fucking Lord Baelish to this whole motherfucker.
It'd be so epic if it came out, if it got released that like Get Right and Force for like, yo, JW, if you bring Crims and Flusha over to Godsent, we'll join that team with you guys. We'll do it. Yeah. And then like the day came for them to pull the trigger and they were like, fucking with you. Good luck. See you later. Stay on NIP. Now they're back at the top. They've just destroyed Fnatic. They've just ripped apart that entire lineup. That'd be epic. That'd be god tier shit. But yeah, I don't know. This Fnatic lineup just it happened. It looks like it's with both lineups.
you mean like after they go to Godsent?
Yeah,
like
they've already signed the contract.
JW just messages Forrest and he's like, so when are you guys joining the team? And he says, well, am I nuts on your chin? And he says, well, no, why would they be? And he goes, because you can suck my motherfucking dick. And then just like closes, just like deletes him off Skype and goes to like that
blocks
question
him from
mark.
Steam, blocks him from Twitter. Just like, peace.
And then he just makes a tweet like, good day to be an NIP, go ninjas. Like, good, isn't it?
But yeah, no, I mean, Godsent and Fnatic both actually, and Fnatic I think too is they seem to be like, Godsent wants to thrive under that system that Pronax wants to instill that is kind of like late. I think Fnatic's biggest issue is that they want to do this freewheeling system that the previous Fnatic thrived at, that was good in. But I don't think they have the personnel for it anymore. They don't have the experience, because that's the main thing, is like the experience to work together as a team is what really made that previous Fnatic, as an individual as they were so good in that, like the minutia of like teamwork in certain situations. And with Wenton and Lekro being inexperienced, even Twist a little bit inexperienced, and with a skill drop off as well. I don't think they can run that system, especially in an era where we have like. I think this year, it took a while, but I think like middle of this year is when we really started to see the effects of like the increased round and bomb timer come into play, where teams can be way much more tactical. So now that teams are transitioning into that, and you're seeing a lot more like patient and tactical and smart play come in, this individual style of Fnatic, it was even starting to wane with the old lineup. Now I think it's just kind of gone. I don't think the magic's there anymore for that kind of play.
And plus, like when I watched them play, okay, think about how abusive old Fnatic was. They'd gotten at the end as bad as like EnVyUs ever were, you know, like with ridiculous, like every force buy is taken, and then every round where you're losing, what you do is you just make some, like two players have to simultaneously make a mad play aggressively on CT side on different sides of the map, and you just hope one of them works out, and then you play off that, right, and then also you can afford to be a man down at all times because you've got such skilled players, they can still headshot two people. Like, that is not the new Fnatic. That does not exist for Fnatic right now, and you could see it here. If they tried like a mad force buy here, they're going to lose that mad force buy, because they don't have, essentially, this is what I always used to say, if you remember, when that Fnatic team first got Dennis and they went ham. I used to say it's almost like they're cheating, like, not for the obvious reasons, like, yeah, we know, Thorin, did you see the clip on Dustin? No, I meant they're cheating as in, like, they're doing things that should not work, but their mad skill level is, like, getting them out of jail. Like, the things they do almost broke the game. Like, I mean, the famous examples, like, beating G2 on train, that should not have happened. When they beat probably the best example was when they beat El Luminosity on Overpass in the first map of the Katowice final. Like, that should never have happened.
Came back from like 2 to 13 or some shit.
Like, that doesn't work. You only did that because you had this mental lineup that like could do things that don't make sense. So the problem now is you have to create a real identity, and the identity of the team is not we have loads of mad aimers right now.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not like we have the skill. It's not like the fucking Olaf giving that, you know, bravado interview after fucking Barcelona. Like, how do you win these rounds? And he just goes, "We are Fnatic. It's what we do." Also, like, you don't have those balls anymore.
Not only do you not have mad skill, you have someone who's like a black hole of skill, probably dragging you motherfuckers in over the edge. Like, and all I'm going to say is this, right? At the end of Wenton's career, you ready for a bold prediction? At the end of Wenton's career, someone's just going to say, "Wow, you were actually in Fnatic?" And you say, "Yeah." Now let's get on and play this qualifier online for the minor. Okay. It's like that guy. Okay, there's a guy, you won't know his name even. I'll look it up, but I'll when I find it, you will not recognize this guy's name. I'll find it for you.
All right.
But here's a guy where if I showed you his IMDb, you will be like, holy shit, how do I not know this guy? He must be one of the greatest actors of all time. So his name was John Cazale, right? And the reason why he's one of the greatest actors ever, well, isn't rather, but why he looks like it, is because he died in 1978. So he didn't have very much time, right? So as a result, he was in The Godfather, Conversation, which is another Francis Ford Coppola movie, Godfather Part 2, Dog Day Afternoon, and The Deer Hunter. And then he died. Now, you have to understand, that is an insane resume. Like, that's like so many all-time great movies. But he wasn't the best player, even vaguely best actor in the movie. And also, the fact he died is why you think he's mega. Basically, Wenton's not going to die. hasn't even had, and so he's going to be in much worse movies than Fnatic, and you're going to realise that he's just not a very good player. Like, listen, he might be a great guy and he might have a hat, but that's not enough to win in virtual video games, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, here's my question. I mean, actually, I already know the fucking answer to it because I just heard you, go off on him. But what did you see anything in when he stood in for Fnatic that would make you think that they were going to bring him back?
No, I mean, I even said myself, my speculation, when I made the video about the Fnatic Godsent swap, my speculation was, this is one of those moves where you need to announce the roster, so you've just put a guy in there. Like, I actually, literally, my first assumption, could be wrong here, my first assumption when I saw the lineup announced was, oh, maybe they have to wait 3 months to sign Rain. That really is what I thought. That's what I looked at, and I thought, because remember, if G2 signed in roughly around February, that means FaZe signed theirs players if it was for a year around February. So I thought to myself, this is called, I don't want to spend money, because Fnatic is broke, remember, if you know anything about League of Legends and the Fnatic gear thing. This is called, let's wait for someone from FaZe to be available, and when we'll get them instead of Wenton. So you know what, Wenton, you get a good 4-month try, mate, but after that, I think you're out. So they can say they're friends with him, blah, blah, blah. That's all great. I don't think this was really constructed like, yeah, he's going to be sick and we're going to do this with him. I think he's just filling space, harsh as it might sound.
That team would be sick with Rain. If Rain was brought in for him, that would be fucking dirty.
We will see. Okay, one last piece of news before the end of the show.
Yeah.
So DK, who is a guy who does a lot of the news now, and he has a lot of inside contacts, he's doing a very good job. So I would follow him on Twitter if I were you. It's NWDK, NWDEKAY. So he announced a lot of actually the stuff we mentioned on the show is announced, like the news pieces, but there's an interesting piece he had where he said that partly from Get Right and others, it's been announced, well, it hasn't been announced, he'd given the information that apparently Maikelele will play more for NIP in the future. We just don't know when and where, but he will play more in the future. I'll just double check that we don't know where. Let me just double check, just so I can check the piece of information. What do you think in general about that, though, while I'm looking?
I like it because he remember Maikelele is the one that we had when we did Counterpoints like 2 weeks ago when we were when I was in Atlanta, and I don't think you'd quite gotten there yet. I don't know, sometime like that. But he was the player that kind of made us talk about the entire asterisk position of the playmaker, because that's the thing. Like NIP has some good players, but they don't have that playmaker, and I think Maikelele is that guy who brings a different swagger to that team that improves them. I would like that very much. The next question I would have is, because that doesn't surprise me whatsoever, by the way. I don't think it's any coincidence that they've probably their best runs outside of Malmo have been with Maikelele getting to the finals of DreamHack Winter 2014, and then this most recent tournament win they had. So I think that's huge. My next question would be,
for who?
Well, I think that's the thing. It's either going to be for Pitt or Maikelele, right?
Yeah,
or, I mean Pitt or Freiburg. I mean,
remember, supposedly it was some sort of health issue for Pitt, right?
Yeah, I mean, the question of the severity of that, because we don't know about that, but it's either straight up for Pitt or it'd be a situation where the only other move that makes sense if they want to keep Pitt is putting Pitt in Freiburg's role, and then Freiburg would be out. That's the only other one that makes sense to me. Although, I mean, I think it's got to just be straight up for Pitt, because this team, this core of 4 players, have just showed that they just don't want to change players, which is fine, I guess, if that's what they want to go with. But, I would imagine it would just be straight up for Pitt, at least for now. Because I don't even think Pitt's played in a while, has he? He's been out for some time.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's hype. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Not least because I also, in a weird way, in some perverse sense, I want to see at least one LAN where they don't do as well with him and you kind of come back down to earth a bit, because I do think they were a little bit of an overperformance in that tournament. Mm-hmm. But I think it adds an excitement factor. Okay, it turns out I've actually got one extra piece just by looking at his Twitter. So this was actually tweeted less than 1 day ago. It's tweeted by Mixwell, and he says, I will go back to rifle much more from now on. Editor's note, Tarek is fucking with the team again. Back to the comment. I've never liked to be a primary opper. Editor's note, Tarek told him he doesn't like to. And then it said, I want to play more comfy that will help the team. Editor's note, will help Tarek, the team. Okay. And then he says in the next in the next post, I am better rifling than AWPing. I've always been a rifler. This is like, at that point, it's almost like they took him aside. Like Tarek was like, listen, mate, I don't feel like the brainwashing has fully taken control.
Yeah.
I need you to completely say you were actually, you know what? Then you never were at war with East Asia. You were always at war with Eurasia. Like, you never, in fact, were an AWPer. And now you've realized that. You would just like to thank Joseph Stalin, Tarek, for allowing this show trial, and you would happily go off to the gulag of just rifling. What are you talking about, Mixwell?
One more segment of the brainwash machine. One more hour.
He's obviously been in that like cool new rehabilitation facility they have at the back of that Optic mansion. Like they've literally been flashing a light in his eyes every 20 minutes to wake him up and just throwing cold water on him, like, it's like beating his ass. Yeah.
The ice rink opens up and it's like the whole thing comes out. They just have this hidden station where they just brainwash people into the green wall.
2 plus 2 equals Tarek. Okay.
I don't know how I feel about this. Who's the opera in this team now?
I've got to assume it's got to be Tarek, hasn't it? It's got to be Tarek and Naf.
Did he even op it? Yeah, he didn't.
I don't think so. I don't know, mate. This is what happens when you let one of the... Listen, okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Tarek, I actually think's a nice guy. I think he's a cool guy even. Yep. He doesn't seem to start a lot of drama actually on a personal level, despite everyone going like, now, what are you talking about? Didn't you see his streams with Days? Like, that's not real life. That's not real life, you know. It's like a mad reality TV show that you idiots watch on Twitch. In real life, he's a totally chill guy. He's obviously fine. But let's face it, here's the kindest way to say it. If we were giving him some sort of standardized test, he would not rate very highly on said test. Especially if said test was about real life. He would not. He is the Pasha of North America. Get bodied, fans of everyone who I just talked about.
Just insulted like 10 fan bases in one sentence. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what? Sure. I'll allow it. I don't even care. Like, they're
oh my god, I've realised what's happened. Moses, I've realised what's happened. Tarek actually listened to our episode where we made fun of the fact that he looks just like Mixwell. And you know, we always used to tell Tarek, stop AWPing, you should be a really good rifler. When they did the face-off surgery, they actually then brainwashed Mixwell into believing he is Tarek. And now Tarek thinks he is Mixwell. So now Tarek's going to AWP, and Mixwell has to rifle.
Perfect. So they're just, it's a long con. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. I think it's a shit idea, to be honest with you. I think it is a shit idea. Like, here's the thing. You change in-game leaders. You cut DAPs. You have this weird transition period where you cut one and then bring them back and cut the other one. You just bring Tarek in. Now you go to an event. You have pretty good results for a first event as a team, dropping some Titans there, dropping some big name teams, knocking them out of the tournament even. And then you just had to change things like right after the day after the event. Like, have they even time to like go? Like, this is what scares me is they this was announced, if this is less than a day ago, on Monday. So like the day or Monday or Tuesday. So the day or the 2 days after the event. So have they even had time to like go back and watch the demos and say this is what was actually wrong? Was Mixwell's AWPing? And if you're going to take him off the AWP, that means I assume it's actually going to be Naf who will be the primary, which is much better than Tarek. I think Tarek's a good AWPer, but I would much rather have him with a rifle.
Here's the problem with that though. Is like Mixwell, his downside is he's in NA, which is obviously like a cesspit of fucking ego. And the worst thing is Mixwell actually seems like a very, very laid back guy who doesn't seem to... The problem he has is he's actually like a Shroud Skadoodle where he doesn't seem to realise how good he actually can be. Like, he seems to think he's just another player in the team. You're like the best player in that team, mate. So the sick thing is... I just feel like, if you remember, he was the one after like the second game or something, said something, did a tweet like, yeah, worst tournament of my career so far, like, so sorry or something. So I feel like he was like, oh yeah, I wasn't doing very well with the AWP in that game, sorry guys. And then Tarek's like, bro, just give me the AWP, bro, I'll take it, I'll take that shit. Listen man, this fool, like, come on man. Where's the coach in this team? Do they have a coach? No, they had Devil Walk, and then I think the week after he like signed on, they did the coaching ruling, and he was like, "Well, I'm done. See ya." I mean, Garrett's available, so it's available for everything. Interviews. Ironically, he won't be getting any interviews for jobs either, actually, Moses. And all he can do is go watch VODs of when CLG used to lose. To remember the good old days. And scene.
Oh man, yeah, that'll be interesting. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we'll just see. I will see. I don't know why these teams like between.
I actually think Garrett should go and try and coach one of the teams that's an up and coming team like Mongols or something. Not because I think he'd be a good coach for Mongols, but just because he can fuck off to Mongolia. Just get him the fuck out of NA is all I'm saying. Anyway, yeah, what were you gonna say?
What was I gonna say? Oh, this team does need a coach. I mean, would you look at this fucking ridiculous sequence that could pay off, might not, but then look at the pick ban phase they just went through in New York. Someone needs to get a control of this team and say, you do not fucking play train ever against SK.
Okay, I think that's the end of the show. It has been like 3 hours long. Moses, do you have a final comment?
Nah.
Okay,
I'm all good.
Okay, one last thing. Let's try and figure this out. So remember, we need a title, a subtitle. What was something ridiculous in the show that could be the subtitle that isn't what the show is about, but it was ridiculous? What was some of the most ridiculous shit we said? What do you think we should go with?
I mean, it would be something about the fucking. The most ridiculous shit was that devil picture with HellRaisers where we went in that whole like rabbit hole with the Playboy reference.
Yeah. So like deal with the devil or something.
Or or deep in the Playboy bunny hole.
There we go. That's it. Right. That's the end. Goodbye, everyone.